Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Jen Carson. James Carson was a typical American in the 80s. He married a girl named Lynn, and they had a daughter named Jen. James was not particularly intelligent. He was more focused on family and children, always treating his loved ones with great love. He was a devoted father, but during that time, the hippie culture was gaining momentum, and James did not shy away from it. He loved to have fun and indulged in the forbidden. Nevertheless, his daughter remembered him as a very caring man who often told her stories at night. James did not work. Instead, his more educated wife, who had a decent job, provided for the family. At first, it appeared to be a loving union, but over the years, striking changes began to occur in him. He became increasingly rude and aggressive, bought himself a gun, and periodically threatened his wife with it. Lynn decided it was better to separate after 10 years of marriage. Their 5-year-old daughter Jen was too young to understand what was happening. Most of the events that unfolded remained a mystery to her until she grew older and learned the shocking truth about her father. However, the key character in this story is not only James but also Susan, a woman born into a wealthy family in the 60s. Her father was a highly successful producer who granted her a lavish lifestyle. She could only dream of such a life. She married another wealthy man, resulting in 2 children. However, as Susan's children reached their teenage years, she grew weary of the daily routine and wanted to get the most out of life. Therefore, she began a second secret life, which she kept hidden from her family. Susan became quite dissolute, preferring much younger men with whom she engaged in intimate relationships. One of her young lovers introduced her to banned substance, which had become widespread at that time. This marked the beginning of the end of her idyllic life. It turned out that Susan had not only secret affairs but also mental health issues, which no one had ever addressed. The lack of treatment combined with her reckless lifestyle led to exacerbations of her condition, resulting in regular hallucinations, even when she was in a normal state of consciousness. One day, her husband returned home from work to find triangles drawn on all the walls. Susan spoke of visual hallucinations and showed signs of schizophrenia. Her husband uncovered her little secrets about her affairs on the side and discovered her mental disorders. However, he did not condemn his wife and took the situation calmly. Unfortunately, he was not willing to help her and simply filed for divorce. Given the problems Susan was facing, he easily obtained full custody of their children. This outcome seemed to suit her completely. She did not even attempt to challenge the court's decision. Now she was alone, without her children, and still full of a desire to have fun. Additionally, after the divorce, Susan received a substantial amount of money, which led her to throw a big party at her home, where James also appeared. Susan was almost 10 years older than James, yet he fit her interests. Their acquaintance was intensified by the use of strong illegal substances. Susan's issues escalated to such a degree that she began to believe she was hallucinating. Their meeting coincided with James's divorce, and nothing could restrain the lovers. Several months passed, and their strange relationship was marked by emotional highs and lows. Later, Susan said that she had immediately fallen in love with James and that he became the man of her dreams. He officially changed his name to Michael Bear Carson, and in 1978, they went on a trip to Europe in search of their spiritual followers. Soon, the situation only worsened, as all of Susan's savings from the divorce were spent on banned substances and entertainment. At this time, Michael was under her complete control. They believed in a fictitious religion centered around Susan, who claimed she could see those possessed by demons, distinguish witches, sorcerers, and other dangerous entities. Meanwhile, Michael became a sort of instrument for executing witches. During this period, Lynn fought to obtain full custody of Jen. Lynn succeeded, but on weekends, Jen had to visit her father and stepmother. Jen found herself in a poorly organized home. She was only 4 years old at the time, later recalled entering the house to find it nearly empty, with many trees planted in pots throughout the interior. She described it as a kind of magic forest, as the house held little more than a single water bed for sleeping. From her later memories, weekends at her father's house felt like a horror movie. She did not like Susan, whom she described as a villain from a cartoon, it seemed that her father and stepmother were ignoring her existence. Jen instinctively felt that women should not eat, and later she discovered that she preferred to starve all weekend rather than eat the food offered to her. Despite the difficulties Jen faced, she initially did not tell her mother about the frightening real-life stories that haunted her. Instead, her memories from her early years were often filled with something terrifying. Jen remembered well that Susan considered her possessed by demons, punished her by scratching her back, while her father blindly believed everything his beloved Susan said and supported any punishment. Jen could do nothing to resist the much stronger adults. Susan repeatedly tried to conduct some kind of exorcism rite on Jen, and during one of these sessions, Jen's body bore 5 marks resembling claw scars. When Lynn noticed these marks, she was alarmed and wondered what was happening in that house. She tried to ask Jen about it, but because of her young age, it was difficult for the girl to explain. Nevertheless, Lynn still sensed that something was wrong. It became clear to her that James's transformation into Michael was not an accidental event. In marriage, he had become much more aggressive. Lynn now believed that her daughter was in danger. Attempts to reach James were futile, as he was completely under Susan's influence. Contrary to the court's decision, Lynn took her daughter and ran away with her. Until that moment, they had lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and now they had moved to California. Lynn did not tell anyone their new address because she feared that if her actions were revealed, Jen would be taken away and that she would lose any opportunity to see her. She felt that Jen would not survive to enter school. Lynn did not want to contact law enforcement at all, knowing how slowly the system worked. Realizing that anything could happen during an investigation, she decided not to waste time. Lynn had to quit her job, and they lived very poorly after the escape, relying on random earnings. This escape became the second significant event in Jen's life. The first was the sudden divorce of her parents, which she never understood because her mother and father had once seemed to love each other. As she grew older, she supported Lynn's actions. Her mother explained that her father was sick, and they just needed to stay away from him to avoid being infected. In reality, James and Susan's way of life became eccentric, spending money on substances while neither worked. They decided to move to California, possibly because, during a moment of clarity, Michael wanted to reclaim his daughter, or maybe he thought things would be better there. They had no idea where they could find Jen and Lynn after moving. After days of wandering, Susan and Michael settled in San Francisco, where they met a girl named Karen Barnes, who was then 23 years old. Karen dreamed of becoming an actress and moved to California to try her luck in acting. Unfortunately, during this period, she met Susan and Michael, who willingly shared information about their cult. This unhealthy behavior intrigued her. The entire group ended up in a rented apartment since Susan and Michael could no longer afford housing. Karen became the first person to join this cult. She was attractive and immediately caught Michael's eye. However, he could not betray Susan behind her back, so he approached Karen openly and told her that he believed she should become his second wife. This proposition was unacceptable to Susan. She claimed to have seen the future and insisted that Karen was a witch who intended to destroy the cult and kill them both. Michael believed Susan so completely that he feared her power and obeyed her without question. Susan easily convinced him that he had to deal with Karen, making her the first victim of their cult. Michael agreed, waiting for Karen to arrive after taking a cast iron frying pan and a knife. On March 7, 1981, he hit Karen on the head to stun her and then stabbed her, inflicting 13 wounds to her face and neck in what seemed to be a ritual murder. They wrapped Karen's body in a blanket, placed her head on a pillow, and drew a series of strange symbols on the walls before leaving. Karen's dream of becoming an actress was shattered. When the door was broken down, her skull was discovered in a pool of blood, but no trace of the criminals was found, except for the drawings, which included the name Susan. The apartment had been rented by Karen, and aside from a superficial description from neighbors, there was no information about Michael and Susan. They fled, fully aware that they needed to distance themselves from the crime scene. They hitchhiked north and lived for a year in a secluded cabin in the wilderness, where no one could find them. Very little is known about this period in their lives. A year later, Feeling bored, they discovered an illegal marijuana farm outside the city and decided to go there. It was quite a large illegal organization with a lot of work and a shortage of workers. Susan tended to the plants while Michael monitored the safety of the operation, and together they continued to live their typical hippie lifestyle, remaining constantly intoxicated from substances. A young man named Clark Stevens intervened in the matter. He was a 26-year-old guy, a friend of the plantation owner. Clark was well versed in growing illegal plants, but he drank a lot, and he had his own vision that contradicted Susan's opinion. Clark took the initiative, began giving advice. Susan did not like how actively Clark was interfering in their activities. It seemed as if he was too arrogant. She turned to her husband, declaring that this man was encroaching on the sacred, putting the profit of their religion below him, which was unacceptable. Susan told Michael that she had a vision in which Clark turned out to be an evil sorcerer. Naturally, this statement automatically became a death sentence for Clark. After Clark's murder, Michael obtained a gun. It is unknown where exactly it came from. In any case, he did not use it at first. He carried it with him to guard the farm. After Clark was dealt with, his body was doused with gasoline and burned. The remains were disposed of by burying them not far from this forbidden plantation in the forest. Later, the date of death was set as May 12, 1982. It is curious that this farm was located no more than a kilometer from residential buildings. In early summer of the same year, one of the families had an outdoor barbecue. They did not go deep into their yard but moved to the far part of a large plot of land. They had a large dog that they let run around. The animal went into the forest, as if attracted by something, and when it returned, the owners noticed something strange in its mouth. When the dog approached the married couple, they discovered it was carrying a part of a human skull. Naturally, the family called the police. Law enforcement officers discovered an illegal farm that had been abandoned in a hurry. No one was there, but a group of young people interviewed by the authorities told of a pair of dirty hippies who had fled the plantation quickly. They fled by hitchhiking again, disappearing into the territory of the states. On May 1983, the area around the plantation was thoroughly searched by a team that went deep into the forest, where they found Clark's burial place and a tourist backpack. Inside, they found various items, a pistol, a fake ID, and also a manifesto describing the program of a cult-like religious organization called Hunt. The most disturbing item was a list of names and surnames of so-called witches and sorcerers that included even popular figures such as Ronald Reagan, the current president of the United States, as well as the governor of the state. The police were particularly interested in two other names, Clark and Karen, who were already listed as killed. In total, the list contained 12 people, consisting of ordinary citizens. However, it turned out to be impossible to establish their fates precisely, as there was nothing specifying either addresses or phone numbers. Due to the possibility of a national security issue, the Federal Bureau of Investigation began a search. During this period of Jen's life, terrible changes began to occur. Her father, Michael, called Lynn and said that he was returning to California and intended to take Jen. Lynn did not give him the address. She was very scared because she could not even contact the police for protection. However, this did not even need to be done because just a few hours after Michael's call, FBI agents arrived at her home. The authorities already knew that Michael was actually James Carson, and Lynn was his ex-wife. Jen was the daughter whom the ex-wife had actually kidnapped. Despite this, they treated Lynn's act leniently, considering all the circumstances and the danger for Jen. The agents knew they were dealing with a very dangerous couple of criminals. In the father's desire to take Jen, they saw an opportunity to catch the killers. As far as the law enforcement officers knew at that time, Susan and Michael were hitchhiking, making it impossible to track their exact location. On May 12, 1983, in the car, a 30-year-old truck driver named John Hellier. A couple of young people who looked harmless were heading to California and picked up a other man. The only space in his car suitable for passengers was the cabin, but with 3 of them in the front, it was cramped. The hitchhikers began to settle inside when they climbed in. Michael saw this and was furious, as he perceived the contact of a mere mortal with the prophetess as a sign of disrespect. Susan supported his opinion. Michael took out other pistol, as the first one was thrown not far from the plantation. The cabin was cramped. John managed to start a fight. They fell out onto the road. Other motorists drove by, some even stopping to help, while Susan shouted to Michael that he had to finish off evil sorcerer. Realizing that a grown man could defeat her husband, Susan took a knife and approached John, stabbing the wounded driver. They run away, leaving John's body on the side of the highway in Napa County. Susan and Michael stole a truck and took off. However, witnesses reported to the police, which led to a big chase. Susan and Michael lost control and drove into a ditch. But they were not going to surrender. A shootout with the police began. The criminals managed to escape again, this time on foot. Susan and Michael then was miraculously detained after John's murder. No one was seriously hurt, and it was time for they of villains to face fair punishment. Although there was evidence that they had victimized others on the list, they were not required to confess, particularly to the murders of Karen and Clark. They could only be charged with the murder of John, as there were witnesses and irrefutable evidence. When Susan and Michael were brought in for questioning, they refused to cooperate with the police, demanded the involvement of all TV channels, press, and newspapers. They sought to turn their bloody tale into a major press conference in order to gain fame. Susan insisted that she was a clairvoyant, claiming this would allow them to attract as many followers as she wanted, specifically targeting young people who were as devoted as Michael. Naturally, law enforcement agencies did not want to give such attention to them. As the trial approached, their demands for media involvement were partially met, but not to the extent that Susan had wanted. There were several reporters in the courtroom. Susan claimed that President Reagan was a demon who needed to be killed. Law enforcement managed to extract the names of 2 victims. And Michael confessed to killing Clark, who had worked with them on a plantation of prohibited plants. He also spoke about the failed actress, Karen. Before the trial even began, everything Susan and Michael said seemed like a circus. Susan expressed absurd ideas that were later quoted in various reports. Several books were written about her prophecies, but few people took her claims seriously. Among Susan's statements was the assertion that all these murders were committed in self-defense. She concluded her speech by expressing her bewilderment at why their fight against evil warranted any accusations. The forensic expert detailed the atrocities committed by Susan and Michael, making it obvious that their actions had nothing to do with self-defense or fighting demons. They themselves were pure evil. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 75 years for 3 counts of murder. It was clear that the killers should never have been released. It seemed that everything was over, but Jen's life turned into a nightmare. She accidentally learned the whole truth about her father and stepmother, which came with shocking details. Consequently, she found it impossible to trust anyone. Realizing that her own father, the man who had personally fed her breakfast every day and combed her hair, was capable of such terrible evil, she understood that evil was everywhere, impossible to escape. In her youth, she slept with scissors and a knife under her pillow, believing it the only way she could close her eyes and fall asleep. This fear eventually transformed into a fear that she herself could become a manifestation of pure evil, because the blood of murderer ran in her veins. Thoughts of what her father had done haunted her relentlessly. At the age of 10, Jen even considered taking her own life. During that difficult time, she was actively supported by her mother, stepfather, and teachers. These close figures helped her resist despair, and she chose to embrace life. As a teenager, Jen dated various guys but found it hard to hide the truth about her father. Many learned who he was and subsequently broke up with her. Eventually, Jen concocted a story that he had died in a car accident, yet the truth became unbearable over time, prompting her to confess. Ultimately, she realized she had to confront her fear head-on. At the age of 20, Jen visited prison for the first time in years to see her father. During all this time, he had sent her letters every week, but their content was bizarre. When they finally met, she did not even use the transparent barrier and phone but met him in person. Her father hugged her, and she felt choked with horror as he told absurd stories about the fortune teller Susan. Speaking as though he had last seen her only yesterday, he was completely unaware that he had been locked away for the last 15 years. As she left the visit, she realized he had not changed a bit, nor did he feel guilty. The father who had loved her simply no longer existed. After this encounter, Jen contacted the families of Michael Carson's victims and apologized on his behalf. They all responded in the same way: she was not guilty and should not suffer for her father's crimes. After this, she began to manage her traumas, but her nightmares were far from over. In 2014, a reform of the correctional system was enacted, enabling Susan and Michael to request parole every 5 years. Jen's nightmares returned once again when Michael applied for parole for the first time. Jen was on the commission, but contrary to her previous stance, she argued that he was dangerous and did not regret the crimes he committed. She insisted that if he were released, he would kill again. The next attempt for parole took place in May 2020, but James was again refused. The court ruled that he would have the next opportunity no earlier than 10 years from then, which means in May 2030, when he turns 74, he will try to get out again. The situation with Susan was somewhat different. She also applied for parole in 2015, but her request was denied. The court ruled that she would not be eligible for another opportunity for 15 years. A lawyer took up her case, believing that this was too long a period. In 2023, the defense attorney's appeal was approved, so in December 2025, another hearing will be held, and Susan will have the right to seek parole. The families of the victims of these criminals, along with Jen Carson, are waiting with bated breath for this moment, praying that the commission will make a negative decision. Jen and her mother, Lynn, are still convinced that the real number of the killer's victims is much higher than 3. Determined to make a difference, Jen decided to devote her life to helping people, particularly those who are contemplating self-harm. For this purpose, she received a doctorate in social work. Now, while helping others, she has found peace. Jen understands that she cannot atone for her father's sins nor bring innocent victims back to life. She can only live her life in a way that brings as much light to the world as possible, and she is committed to doing this. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Cynthia George. On an afternoon on June 16, 2001, an attack at a gas station in Akron, Ohio, shattered the peaceful atmosphere and claimed the life of a successful businessman once admired by the upper class. Ed George and Cynthia George were famous residents and were considered the wealthiest in the state of Agaya, USA. Ed was a successful Lebanese businessman who owned a banquet hall and a nightclub. He was one of 8 children in a Lebanese Catholic family. After completing his education at the University of Michigan, he joined the family business founded by his father, Edwin George, in 1948. Although the original building was destroyed by fire, Ed rebuilt it and expanded the venue to include an entertainment center for events. During its peak, the establishment hosted renowned musical acts. Cynthia George, Ed's wife, was a charming and attractive socialite, known for her petite frame, blonde hair, and striking blue eyes. They had 7 children together. Cynthia grew up in North Canton in a low-income family. Her father worked as a miner, and her mother took care of the home and children. Lacking exposure to wealth, Cynthia began working at a young age. Although she couldn't afford higher education, she quickly realized that her looks could provide her with a path to a more comfortable life, leading her to pursue a career as a dancer. At this time, Cynthia, a 20-year-old, attended a nightclub casting call in 1978, managed by Ed, who was 15 years her senior. Although she didn't get the job, she caught Ed's attention, and they began dating. He seemed to be a convinced Catholic and was in no hurry to get married. However, after 6 years together, they got married in a lavish ceremony, attended by over 500 guests. This marriage fulfilled Cynthia's dream of a luxurious lifestyle. Cynthia and Ed moved into a spacious mansion with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. First of all, they wanted children, and over the next few years, Cynthia gave birth to 4 daughters. Ed felt this wasn't enough, so they adopted 2 boys. In 1994, at the age of 40, Cynthia became pregnant again and had another girl. The family comfortably managed their large household with the help of servants and a steady income from an upscale restaurant at the club. Despite his busy work schedule, Ed always made time for his children. He would comb his daughter's hair every morning, assist with their homework in the evenings. Being a person with a healthy lifestyle, he is never absent from any sporting event. Meanwhile, Cynthia relies heavily on nannies to take care of her children and enjoys a leisurely life of partying and shopping. Her husband supported this lifestyle, giving her plenty of freedom. While his substantial wealth, Cynthia often complained about receiving too little money, even though she indulged in whatever she wanted. In fact, Cynthia turned out to be not such a decent woman as she initially seemed. From the first years of marriage, she had lovers that her husband did not suspect. She flirted and met different men right in his club. One of her main lovers was Jeff Zach, a tall and charming man known for his appeal to women. He had Israeli roots. By 1976, he dropped out of school and decided to move to his homeland to study his Jewish origins. He became a citizen of Israel and even served in the army as a paratrooper. Jeff was multilingual and claimed to be a special agent involved in real combat operations. After 3 years, he returned to the United States. At 29, he met a beautiful brunette named Bonnie Cook in an Arizona restaurant. They quickly fell in love, decided to solidify their union by marriage, and then have children. During this time, Bonnie discovered a different side of her husband. She noticed that Jeff seemed to have 2 contrasting personalities. One was calm and gentle, while the other was aggressive and cruel. These personalities appear unpredictably. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed a son. During this period, Jeff attempted to start a new business. He had many different startup ideas, but none were successful. They managed to make ends meet and moved into a comfortable 2-story house in the small town of Stowe, Agaya. Here, Jeff began a business involving vending machines. Although he became somewhat calmer over time, he still frequently experienced angry outbursts. His violent nature even led to several legal issues. Shortly after moving in one evening, Bonnie and Jeff were dining at Ed's club when Bonnie noticed her husband staring intently at a beautiful stranger. During dinner, Jeff even complimented the blonde multiple times, which greatly upset Bonnie. This attractive woman was Cynthia. That night, Jeff also met Ed, the owner of the club, and realized that building a friendship with him could significantly benefit his business. He spent the rest of the evening socializing with Ed and his wife, leaving Bonnie alone at the table. Jeff and Ed quickly hit it off and began a friendship. Eventually, Bonnie and Cynthia also grew close, regularly visiting each other's families and celebrating holidays together. Ed invested in Jeff's business by purchasing 100 vending machines and connecting him with valuable partnerships. This investment allowed Jeff to place machines in prime locations throughout the city, leading to the success of his business. Despite the rapid development of the business, soon, Bonnie became the main breadwinner of the family. Her career as a real estate agent was thriving. During this time, Jeff retired a little from business Respawn and spent more time with their son. The boy helped service vending machines, buy products for them, and carry out scheduled repairs. Jeff also started attending his son's training sessions and sporting events. Despite the fact that the life of both families seemed ideal from the outside, problems continued inside. Cynthia, who was 40 years old at the time, struggled with depression. Her friends encouraged her to participate in a local beauty contest in Agaya in 2000, specifically for married women over 21. Although Cynthia met the age requirement, she would be competing against younger women, many nearly half her age. Despite this challenge, she was determined and motivated. Winning the contest could allow her to represent her state at the national level and potentially advance to international competitions. The prizes included gold jewelry and complimentary beauty salon appointments. Cynthia was motivated by a desire to win and prove that she was the most beautiful in the city and the state. Her main goal was to gain influence. To prepare for the beauty contest, she tightened her diet and increased her training. Ultimately, Cynthia placed third in the competition. Despite her disappointment, she held her head high and smiled when the winner was announced. Competing at 40 years old as a mother of 7 against 20-year-olds was a significant achievement in itself. Even though she didn't win first place, her popularity grew. On June 16, 2001, multiple calls came into the police station near a gas station reporting an attack on the driver of a Ford SUV vehicle. 2 witnesses heard an explosion and saw a man, injured in the head, still alive, but struggling to breathe. Fortunately, a nearby nurse intervened, with help from another bystander, to pull the victim out of the car and provide first aid. They called emergency services and managed to keep the driver alive until paramedics arrived. The man was rushed to a medical center, where doctors did everything they could to save him. However, he tragically died just minutes after arrival. Law enforcement quickly secured the area and the vehicle. The driver's side window was shattered. The bullet entered through the cheek and exited the other side of the skull, breaking the passenger window. The deformed bullet was later discovered on the street near the car, while the cartridge case was found approximately 100 meters away from the parking lot. Witnesses, including a gas station employee, Carolyn Hyson, saw the victim arrive just before the attack. Shortly after, a motorcyclist pulled up, calmly approached the driver's side window, and attacked with weapons. Carolyn had a clear view of the criminal as he looked directly at her before he got on his motorcycle and rode away. He was a stocky man with dark hair, dressed entirely in black, resembling Ghost Rider, which seemed unusual for a summer day. However, he was wearing a helmet, so she couldn't see his face. Meanwhile, she was able to provide a detailed description of the motorcycle. It was a Street Fighter model, black and gray with neon green lights. She recalled that this distinctive man had been seen riding back and forth on the street multiple times, as if he was deliberately waiting for his target. After Carolyn reported the case at work, 2 managers ran out to the car. They were the ones who provided first aid and called an ambulance. The police quickly accessed the gas station's surveillance footage, but unfortunately, the quality was too poor to identify the attacker. They could see the motorcycle, but not its license plate. Detectives began investigating the identity of the murdered man to compile a list of potential suspects. To their surprise, they discovered that many people had negative opinions about him. Jeff was known to be difficult, hot-tempered, and often argued with neighbors over trivial matters. The investigation found that Jeff had several problematic business relationships and was involved with married women. He also had a criminal record. In 1981, he was convicted for running an illegal escort agency in Arizona. At the store where he frequently purchased supplies for his machines, people spoke poorly of him. He was notorious for flirting with attractive female employees, many of whom were schoolgirls working part-time. One witness recounted an incident involving a 17-year-old girl whom Jeff harassed to obtain her phone number. After she reluctantly provided it, he began calling her incessantly, offering money for intimate. This harassment continued until the girl's father intervened, threatening Jeff with legal action for corrupting a minor. There were other similar incidents, which contributed to his tarnished reputation. Detectives were aware of many individuals who might seek revenge against him. When the police arrived at Jeff's family's home to inform his wife about the incident, she was shocked and started to cry. They had been married for 15 years. Although she couldn't believe what had happened, she didn't appear especially surprised given her husband's controversial reputation and the many people who disliked him. Bonnie recounted the events of the day her husband was killed. That morning, Jeff was at home with his wife and son. He needed to go on his usual trip to check on the machines and restock them. Jeff asked his son for help, but the boy, upset with his father, refused. This prompted an argument between them, which Bonnie mentioned was a common occurrence. She herself was tired of the behavior of her husband, who treated her frankly badly. She admitted that she was thinking about divorce. Fortunately the teenager refused to help his father. It is possible that this saved his life. Typically, when disagreements arose, Jeff would react aggressively towards his son. During one instance, he attempted to involve Bonnie in an unpleasant discussion, but she chose to ignore him. He then claimed to have found a new woman who was superior to Bonnie in every way. She recognized this as another attempt to provoke her and continued to disregard his comment. To back up his claim, Jeff left the house, stating he was going to see his mistress. However, in reality, he went to wholesale warehouses to purchase items for vending machines. For several hours, he was in stores arranging merchandise, with this confirmed by witnesses and surveillance footage. The trips ended with a stop near a gas station where the killer acted quickly. There was reason to believe that Jeff was a big fan of lying. He frequently confided in a friend for the most intimate things. The police interviewed this friend, and he confirmed that Jeff tended to exaggerate his past to fit in with wealthier social circles. They also spoke with the victim's son. He supported his mother's account of a conflict with his father that morning. He struggled with mixed emotions regarding his parents. He loved his father, as they had grown closer recently. However, he was deeply troubled by his father's treatment of his mother, having witnessed years of emotional abuse and infidelity. The schoolboy really wanted to help find the killer. The numerous betrayals of Jeff seemed like a valuable clue. In addition, shortly before the massacre, Jeff deceived the contractors who were doing construction work. He paid them only about $7,000, less than the initial agreement, under a far-fetched pretext. However, these builders had a confirmed alibi. Bonnie stated that she didn't have specific suspicions about the killer, but she described Jeff as having a nasty and aggressive personality, which could lead him into trouble at any moment. She mentioned that he frequently received threatening messages and calls. One of the strange messages was saved on the answering machine, and she showed it to the police. It was received on Wednesday, June 13, at 2:55 p.m. from a man. According to Bonnie, when Jeff listened to the message, he became visibly agitated. Previously, he had taken such calls lightly, sometimes even joking about them, but this time he became restless and started pacing the room, deep in thought. Bonnie didn't know who the caller was, but she felt the voice on the recording sounded menacing. After the conversation, he said goodbye and mentioned they would speak again soon. Bonnie revealed that her husband left and went into hiding for several days after the call. He only returned home on Saturday morning, just before his death, and was in a very bad mood. The police interviewed all of Jeff's relatives and friends. Even his parents described Jeff as a swindler and a manipulator, someone unreliable, often distracted, who could also be involved in mischief and intimidation. During their investigation, officials discovered light illegal substances in Jeff's pockets, pointing to another area of inquiry. It seemed Jeff had connections to the criminal underworld, or perhaps he owed someone money, and this became the reason for the massacre. However, this line of investigation also led to no new findings. A forensic expert established more details surrounding the cause of death. The bullet entered through the right ear, damaging the oral cavity and causing severe bleeding. Within minutes, his lungs filled with blood, leading to choking. The wound itself turned out to be non-fatal. After talking to people involved with Jeff, the detectives eventually contacted the George, who had a close relationship with Jeff. They discovered that Cynthia was one of Jeff's mistresses, and their affair had lasted nearly a decade. This revelation drew significant attention during the investigation. The investigators also was revealed that Cynthia had a history of infidelity, maintaining several extramarital relationships. Before, when the detectives arrived at George's family mansion, Cynthia answered the door. She appeared disoriented, speaking slowly and in a confused manner. She claimed to already know about the murder because her husband showed her a newspaper that reported on Jeff's death on the front page. This event upset her. Cynthia was reluctant to answer many of their questions. She gave vague responses to some inquiries and ignored others altogether. Ed also responded evasively, denying any involvement of their family in the tragedy. They was clearly trying to avoid being connected to the investigation or appearing in police reports, as this could harm their reputation. Cynthia provided an alibi for both herself and Ed. Then that was verified. Surprisingly, Bonnie was fully aware of the affair between her husband and Cynthia. Jeff had informed his son about the relationship several years after it began. The reason for this disclosure was unclear. This painted a negative picture of Jeff's character. Bonnie suspected the affair as early as 1998, when she accidentally overheard a phone conversation between Jeff and Cynthia. Although she caught him being unfaithful, he managed to reassure her and deflect her concerns. Realizing she needed stronger evidence, Bonnie decided to spy on her husband and eventually confirmed her suspicions is right. By the end of 1999, Jeff confessed that he had been involved with Cynthia for 10 years. He claimed that their relationship had ended, and they were now just business partners. The mother of Jeff supported Bonnie's claims, stating that she was aware of her son's infidelities, including his involvement with Cynthia. Jeff frequently shared his personal thoughts with his mother, but she also insisted that he loved and respected Bonnie. After speaking with close friends of the George family, the police uncovered several intriguing details. Jeff met Cynthia at a club in 1991, where he pretended to be a doctor. When Cynthia discovered he was lying, he created a new story, claiming to be a special agent. This deception captivated Cynthia, a socialite. Interestingly, it was Cynthia who wrote the check to purchase the machines, not her husband. Her feelings for Jeff Stem was explained by Ed's preoccupation with work, which leaves her feeling neglected. Some suspected that Ed might have been aware of it for years. However, his strong Catholic beliefs prevented him from ending his marriage to the mother of his 7 children. Others thought he was completely unaware of the situation and blindly trusted his attractive wife. During the interrogation, the nanny shared valuable insights. She, describing Cynthia as self-centered, noted that Cynthia paid little attention to their children. She also saw Cynthia and Jeff, along with their children. She mentioned that Jeff treated his mistress similarly to how he treated his wife, including an incident where he hit Cynthia in public, leaving a bruise on her face. Additionally, it was revealed that Cynthia's youngest daughter might have been the result of an affair, as Jeff showed a lot of affection towards little girl and even took her for walks. It seemed unlikely that someone like him would invest time in another person's child. Due to these suspicions, Cynthia's youngest daughter had to undergo a DNA test, which confirmed that Jeff was indeed her father. After leaving the doctor's office with little girl, Ed stated that he didn't care about her biological parentage. He would love her, just like he loved his other children. Eventually, Cynthia admitted to having an affair with Jeff, but she kept her other secret relationships hidden. It's difficult to believe that Ed wasn't deeply troubled by his wife's infidelity at that moment. A few weeks before the murder, Ed tried to address some issues. He apparently suspected that Jeff was having an affair with Cynthia and wanted to protect her from him. However, Jeff refused the restraining order. Furthermore, Jeff's son reported that his father has shown fearful of Ed in the weeks leading up to the incident, making Ed the primary suspect. However, detectives lacked evidence to prove his involvement. Ed's alibi checked out, but this did not eliminate the possibility that he might have hired someone to commit the crime. A reward was offered for information regarding the murder. An informant, the ex-girlfriend of a man named John Zaffino, reached out to the police. She recalled that in 2001, John had mentioned beating up an Israeli. After hearing about the murder of Jeff Zak, who was identified as a former Israeli paratrooper with gray hair, she wondered if there was a connection. She contacted John, but he was evasive. It also came to light that John owned the same type of motorcycle that was seen at the scene of Jeff's murder. This prompts law enforcement to focus on the 36-year-old John, who had a reputation for being very cruel and dangerous. Immediately after, she ended the relationship because she feared for her safety after experiencing multiple incidents of domestic violence. The woman decided to call John and asked several leading questions. Through their conversation, it became apparent that John might be involved in Jeff's death. She also engaged in several more similar phone calls, attempting to extract a confession from him. But he responded in a paranoid manner, avoiding direct answers. Upon investigating John, it was discovered that he had access to a .357 Magnum weapon, which was the same type as the Jeff's murder weapon. Interestingly, it was also confirmed by multiple witnesses that he knew Cynthia. The story is reenacted that Cynthia met John, an unemployed truck driver, in 2000, and they began an affair while she was still in a relationship with Jeff. 9 months later, in May 2001, she decided to end her relationship with Jeff and asked him to stop contacting her. However, Jeff was persistent and continued to call. Cynthia's husband noticed these unusual phone calls and suspected her. Whenever he picked up, the caller would hang up immediately. Ed did not want a public investigation and public attention to his private life, so he did nothing. Yet, he suspected that at the center of this problem was his wife's relationship with John. Details of their relationship become clearer when several expensive purchases give John are discovered. John claimed he was at a car dealership about 40 minutes from the crime scene at the time of the attack. However, the investigation revealed that he was actually on a mobile phone call and his location was tracked to a gas station. He only arrived at the car dealership 2 hours later. Investigators were able to track John's geolocation and review his phone records, leading them to suspect that Cynthia had ordered the crime. Adding to the evidence, a voice analysis confirmed that a threatening phone call received by Jeff was directed at John. The police believed that Jeff had begun threatening Cynthia when she decided to end their relationship, which he strongly opposed, which was quite consistent with Jeff's temperament. Feeling threatened, Cynthia decided to take action against him. On the tragic morning following an argument with his wife and son, Jeff looked up information about Cynthia, who he was deeply infatuated with and wanted to keep. The prosecution presented a clear narrative, but there was no evidence implicating Cynthia, so only John was taken into custody. John Zaffino's trial started on February 26, 2003. When called to testify on March 7, Cynthia chose to invoke her Fifth Amendment right, which allows her to avoid self-incrimination. Ed made the same choice. The main witness for the prosecution was John's ex-girlfriend, who detailed events from John's life leading up to the murder. The investigators also provided the murder weapon and confirmed that John owned it. Ballistic tests eliminated any doubts about this connection. However, there were no eyewitnesses identifying John as the perpetrator, nor was there any DNA evidence at the crime scene, which made the prosecutor's job more challenging. On March 10, 2003, after 4 hours of deliberation, John Zaffino was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. 23 years after the verdict, Bonnie approached John, stating that he was merely a pawn while Cynthia enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, asked if it was worth it. She likely hoped John would express his anger and reveal the truth, but he chose to remain silent. For a long time, the police lacked solid evidence against Cynthia. To bring her to justice, they gathered information about her involvement, piece by piece. On January 10, 2005, Cynthia was arrested while shopping. Ed posted bail of $2 million, allowing her to remain at home until her trial began in November 2005. The case gained momentum when new evidence emerged. Investigators discovered that John had planned to attack Jeff on May 8 while Jeff was relaxing in a national park. During this time, John was on a bridge talking on the phone with Cynthia for about 3 hours. She was also on another call with Jeff, coordinating their actions. The attack was interrupted when a park ranger noticed John's weapon case. When questioned, John claimed this was a misunderstanding and waiting for his girlfriend. A week later, a mushroom picker found a weapon in the park, which provided indirect evidence of Cynthia's involvement in the conspiracy. Ed hired a strong defense team of 5 lawyers for his wife, significantly reducing the prosecution's chances of success. During the trial, many revealing details emerged about Cynthia and her affair with John. The investigators was noted that Cynthia even paid for John's lawyers. One significant piece of evidence included recorded phone conversations between John and his sisters, which featured incriminating remarks in which he pressured Cynthia to uphold her part of their agreement. The defense argued that Cynthia had no reason to want Jeff dead and no motive to be involved in a murder plot. In contrast, the prosecution firmly claimed that Cynthia had a motive for the murder. After their breakup, Jeff tried to keep Cynthia in his life. They frequently argued, especially concerning their daughter, whom he threatened to take with him to Israel. Cynthia also felt at risk of their affair being revealed by Jeff, which could lead to her public humiliation. During the trial, 2 letters from Cynthia to John, who was in prison, were presented. These letters revealed their ongoing romantic relationship and showed that she remained deeply connected to him. In one letter, she sent him a Bible and expressed that she frequently prays for him. After facing public humiliation due to Cynthia's actions, Ed defended her against conspiracy charges. He emphasized his commitment to their marriage vows and refused to seek a divorce. Surprisingly, Cynthia chose not to testify in her defense, and John also did not take the stand. Ultimately, Cynthia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and received, with the possibility of parole in a year. After the trial, Ed continued to defend his wife. He hired new lawyers who filed an appeal on her behalf. Cynthia served 16 months before she was released on March 22 after Ohio's 9th District Court of Appeals ruled that the circumstantial evidence presented by prosecutors, including phone records, correspondence, and financial documents, was insufficient to prove her guilty. Cynthia continues to live a normal life now. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Nohema Graber. When a student at Fairfield High School received his Spanish test results, he found that his entire exam had been marked in red pen. He had failed because received a low grade. He was furious in front of his classmates, but the teacher reassured him, stating that she believed in his abilities and that he just needed to prepare better for the next test. Little did the elderly woman know that this would later have a tragic effect on her life. Fairfield is a small, quiet town in the southeastern part of the state of Quince, with a population of around 99,000 people. It features beautiful architecture and has about 12 parks and recreational areas, which is a significant number for a town of its size. One of these parks was a favorite walking spot for teacher Nohema Graber. She followed a daily routine of taking a certain number of steps to stay active and maintain her health, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of nature. However, on November 2, 2021, after finishing her workday, Nohema was tragically killed, leaving the residents of Fairfield in shock and fear. What a devastating event for their once peaceful town. Nohema was born on November 10, 1954, in Jalapa, Mexico, where she grew up in a loving family. From a young age, she was known for her openness and kindness. At the age of 20, Nohema began her career as a flight attendant for a major Mexican airline, which allowed her to indulge her passion for travel and an active lifestyle. She became one of the first women in Mexico to train as a pilot, paving the way for future female pilots in this challenging yet prestigious field. In 1985, at the age of 31, Nohema met Paul Graber, who was visiting Mexico on a business trip. They first encountered each other at a nightclub. After their meeting, Paul received Nohema's phone number and called her a few days later. Initially, he thought she was ignoring him, but she agreed to go on a date. Their relationship quickly blossomed into a romance. After a year of dating, on October 4, 1986, Nohema and Paul got married in Mexico. They then settled in Nohema's hometown, where she continued her work in the airline industry while Paul found a job in this new country. In 1991, after 5 years of marriage, the Greber family welcomed their first child, a son named Christian. A year later, they had another son, Jareth. Nohema, who was 37 and had worked for 17 years, decided to focus on her family. During the 1990s, the area where they lived became increasingly dangerous, prompting they to make the significant decision to leave Mexico and move to America, Paul's homeland. In 1992, they settled in Fairfield, where Paul found a well-paying job and supported the family while Nohema became a stay-at-home mom. Soon after, she gave birth to their daughter, Naima. Nohema quickly adapted to life in the U.S. and began attending St. Mary's Catholic Church, where she made a donation and eventually became a community leader. As time went on, their children grew up and began to move out, leaving Nohema feeling bored and lacking purpose. Once she turned 50, she decided to pursue further education and enrolled at Westland University in Mount Plant, Iowa. There, she earned a degree in English and a teaching certificate. Nohema then secured a job at a high school in Atashtat, Iowa, where she taught Spanish for several years, gaining valuable experience. In 2012, Nohema began teaching at Fairfield High School. Her students and colleagues appreciated her greatly, often speaking of her fondly. Graduates would send her postcards and letters, and she made it a point to respond, and always ending her replies with her signature message, "Be more confident." On November 2, 2021, after school, Nohema drove to the park. She was active and enjoyed walking, but that day she did not return home. Her husband, Paul, grew concerned when she didn't answer his calls. He went to the park and searched their usual spots, but he was unable to find her anywhere, and her car, a blue 1997 Honda Odyssey, was also missing. Feeling anxious, Paul promptly contacted the police to report. Right away, a search began in the park for Nohema. Her colleagues reported that she had not shown up for work, and since the previous evening, she had stopped responding to calls and messages. Meanwhile, students contacted the police with information about their classmate. They revealed that the night before, he had shared disturbing photos on social network. These photos were sent by Jeremy Goodale, a 16-year-old student at Fairfield High School. Born in 2005, Jeremy grew up in a dysfunctional family with 4 older siblings. His parents frequently argued and were often absent, leaving the older children to care for the younger ones. Eventually, the parents divorced. The mother moved in with another man, leaving her children behind to live with their father in the family home. The living conditions in the house were chaotic. It was filled with dirt and dust, flies buzzed around, and the bed linens had gone unchanged for months. They washed only once a week. The children lacked female care and love, so looked unkempt. Jeremy was described by his classmates as a quiet and modest boy who played on a baseball team. He didn't stand out much, except for his messy appearance. However, Jeremy faced more serious issues. He struggled with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Doctors prescribed him medication to help. He studied Spanish with a teacher named Nohema, and his best friend was Willard Miller. Unlike Jeremy, Willard came from a wealthy family, but he found school challenging, particularly with foreign languages. Willard had recently transferred to Fairfield High School after attending a prestigious school with a tougher curriculum. On November 3, the body of Nohema was discovered near the railway in the north. She was lying on the ground wrapped in a tarpaulin, covered with old sleepers, various garbage, branches, and leaves. At the time of the discovery, she had died many hours ago. An initial examination revealed that Nohema died from blunt force trauma to the head. What does that mean? Her death was a homicide, and that her body had been deliberately concealed. Witnesses reported seeing Nohema's Honda Odyssey leave the park around 5:00 p.m. She had spent approximately 45 minutes there. However, the witnesses could not identify or describe the actual driver. Shortly afterward, the police found her blue Honda abandoned on a country road south of where her body was located. Another witness later came forward, stating they saw two young men walking along this same road around 5:30 p.m., heading back to the park. One of them was pushing an old garden wheelbarrow. Unfortunately, this witness could not describe the young men and did not remember their faces. Based on the suspicious photo that went viral, the police arrived at Jeremy's house. He seemed agitated. Although he knew that the teacher was missing, he was unaware that her body had already been discovered. He denied any involvement in her disappearance, but was not informed about what the police had found at his home. Detectives discovered a blood-stained baseball bat and several black hairs in his house. They also found clothes and a blood-stained terry towel belonging to him. On Jeremy's phone, they found a text file titled "Preparation," which detailed the items needed for a planned act, including rubber gloves, wet wipes, a backpack, a bag, a blanket, a garden wheelbarrow, and other supplies. The file also outlined a step-by-step plan of actions. After the officers finished inspecting Jeremy's house, they proceeded to Willard's home. At that time, Willard, like Jeremy, was unaware that their teacher had already been found dead. Willard remained calm during the police questioning and readily discussed how he and Jeremy had walked in the local park the previous evening. However, he became visibly nervous when the conversation shifted to Nohema. His demeanor changed as he mentioned that Nohema did not regard him highly and often underestimated him. Meanwhile, the community of Fairfield was shocked and mourned the passing of Nohema, as she was known to be kind, compassionate, and always helpful to her students, leaving everyone puzzled about why anyone would want to harm her. After searches of the houses, Jeremy Gudella and Willard Miller were arrested and taken into custody on suspicion of murdering their Spanish language teacher. During their interrogation, they were informed that the body had been discovered. Both provided similar accounts of the events. They admitted to walking in the park that afternoon when they encountered their teacher. They greeted her, but suddenly, a group of masked individuals attacked Nohema, hitting her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and fall. Jeremy and Willard claimed they were forced to watch as the assailants continued to assault her. They alleged that they were then told to hide the body, take her car, and abandon it near a country road. Jeremy and Willard denied any wrongdoing, asserting that they were merely witnesses to the murder and had been compelled to obey the orders of the true criminals. However, evidence found in Jeremy's house suggested otherwise. The blood and hair found on the baseball bat, as well as the blood on Jeremy's clothes and towel, all belonged to Nohema. Furthermore, there were no witnesses who saw a group of masked individuals or any strangers in the park. A notebook discovered in Jeremy's house revealed that he and his friends had been stalking Nohema for several weeks. They recorded the times her classes ended, when she left school, how long she spent in her car, and where she went afterward. This detailed documentation of Nohema's schedule indicated that it was easy for them to predict her daily movements. The young men knew that Nohema walked in the park every day and were familiar with this route. They chose the right moment to attack Nohema while she was walking alone on a dark, deserted street. During questioning, Willard admitted that he disliked Nohema because he felt she always underestimated him. He acknowledged that he frequently argued with her during class, and his classmates had witnessed these confrontations. These two young men told conflicting stories. This time, Jeremy accused Willard of hitting Nohema, while Willard insisted he had not touched her, claiming that it was Jeremy who had killed her. During the investigation, the investigators was uncovered that on the day of the incident, Jeremy and Willard went to a park and concealed themselves in an out-of-the-way spot while they waited. When Nohema arrived, one of them struck her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and collapse. The two then dragged her off the path and took turns assaulting her until she died. Afterward, they covered her body with branches and leaves before fleeing the scene in her car, which they abandoned on a country road. While walking, they made their way to Willard's house, where they took a garden wheelbarrow, a shovel, and a tarpaulin. They returned to the crime scene, wrapped the victim in the tarpaulin, placed her in the wheelbarrow, and transported her to the railroad tracks. There, they concealed the body by placing old railway sleepers, garbage, branches, and fallen leaves on top. Once the body was hidden, Jeremy and Willard returned home and attempted to clean up any evidence of their crime, believing they would never be discovered. Detectives discovered unusual search queries on Willard's phone, including: do students receive credit for a lesson if a teacher is seriously injured or dies during a course? And what happens to students' work if a teacher dies mid-course? Before the incident, Willard had planned a trip to Spain, but after receiving a low grade on a test, that trip became uncertain. Prosecutors viewed Willard as the main instigator of the crime, driven by a desire for revenge against the teacher, while his friend Jeremy appeared to be following Willard's lead. Additionally, Jeremy struggled with depression and anxiety, which made him emotionally vulnerable and easier to manipulate. This made him a more suitable accomplice for Willard's malicious scheme. During his trial in December 2021, Jeremy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and agreed to testify against Willard. In his testimony, Jeremy claimed that Willard was the first to attack their teacher, Nohema Graber, on the afternoon of November 2, 2021, when they both invited her out. He stated that Willard pushed her, causing her to fall and sustain serious injuries. However, Jeremy also confessed that after Nohema lost consciousness, he used a baseball bat to strike her multiple times, resulting in her death. Jeremy claimed that he and Willard beat her together to ensure that Nohema would not survive. Throughout the trial, Jeremy continually cried and asked for forgiveness from the family of the deceased. He expressed deep remorse for what had happened. Willard also admitted his guilt, but maintained that Jeremy had delivered the first blow. In court, Willard was more composed. Like Jeremy, he sought forgiveness from the Graber family. He said, "I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I regret that your family is suffering because of me. I sincerely apologize from the bottom of my heart. I fully recognize the seriousness of my actions. I know I was wrong." Willard Miller was the first to be sentenced in June 2023, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Sadly, another tragic event occurred following this story. Nohema's husband, Paul Graber, passed away in June 2023 from terminal cancer. Paul, 68, was buried the day before Willard's verdict was announced, and he never saw his wife's killers face justice. Paul's family and friends reported that he was deeply affected by his wife's death. They believed that if Nohema had been alive, she would have noticed Paul's illness early and sought timely treatment, which might have saved his life. In November 2023, Jeremy Goodale was found guilty in connection with the case of Nohema and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, Jeremy was so distraught that he experienced a nosebleed and cried. He expressed regret, saying, "I wish I could turn back time to prevent this loss and the pain I caused the family. It was the worst decision of my life, and I take full responsibility for what I did." Nohema Graber had 3 adult children, brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces, who certainly miss their beloved and caring mother. They fondly remember their mother and father. It is known that the sons and daughter forgave the murderers and try not to remember them. After their mother's death, one of the sons found their mother's personal diary. In it, she wrote short notes about her life, expressing that she loved teaching and adored her students very much. Nohema wrote that she would always smile and give her students support, stating that even if she could not teach them anything new, Just looking at her would help the students learn to love life. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Aaron Barley. Kindness is not just a gift given, but sometimes also a double-edged sword if misplaced. When compassion is betrayed, will what we give become the seeds of a tragedy? Peter Wilkinson, 47, and his wife, Tracy, 50, lived in Stourbridge in the English county of Westminster. They had 2 children, a daughter, Lydia, who studied biology at Bristol University, and a son, Pierce, who was 13. Despite the fact that Lydia was much older and studying at university, away from the family, the brother and sister communicated every day and shared an extremely close relationship. Tracy Wilkinson was a generous and compassionate woman. A former Latin American champion in ballroom dancing, she became a volunteer to work with elderly people and could talk to anyone to make them feel at ease. She often helped the homeless and never refused to assist those in need. Tracy was a housewife while her husband had his own business. One day in March 2016, Tracy went to the supermarket to do her weekly shopping. After leaving, she noticed a young man named Aaron Barley who was sleeping on the street in a cardboard box. Seeing how he suffered from his situation, Tracy felt sorry for him and decided to invite him to her home on Greyhound Lane. Aaron had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and Tracy decided to do everything in her power to help him get back on his feet. She took Aaron to the city council office, and with their help, he managed to find new housing in a hostel. From that moment, Tracy always tried to ensure that Aaron had hot and fresh food. Such care and concern were extremely rare for Aaron, as his life had been chaotic from the very beginning. Born in 1993 as a result of incest, his parents were his uncle and niece, with a 19-year age difference. His mother worked in a factory, and his father was an innkeeper. By the age of 10, Aaron became an orphan. His father died of cancer when he was 4, and 2 years later, his mother had a heart attack, leading him to spend his entire childhood in orphanages and various foster families. During this period, he faced violence. When Aaron was 13 years old, he is at the center of an investigation into a missing person case, and his photo was circulated in the media after he went missing, with 2 boys in Bromsgrove. Luckily, he was found and received proper medical care. As Aaron got older, he started sleeping on the streets. He also became addicted to banned substance and alcohol. However, it seemed that after meeting Tracy, his life started to improve. He appeared grateful for the help and support. Meanwhile, the Wilkinson family decided to do whatever it took to help him get through life as hard. One day during dinner with Wilkinson family, Aaron said that he just needed someone to give him a chance. Tracy herself has struggled with alcoholism in the past and was now volunteering at a rehab center that had helped her overcome it. She knew from her own experience how debilitating addiction could be and wanted to do everything she could to help him. Peter decided to get Aaron a job as a laborer at one of his businesses in Newport. For 5 months, it seemed that Aaron's life was getting better. He had a steady income, a roof over his head, and a family that truly cared about him. But soon, everything fell apart. In September, Aaron relapsed and started using illegal substances again. He explained that the reason was because his mother had recently passed away, but this was a complete lie. He became constantly drunk, stopped showing up for work on time, and exhibited aggression towards other employees. Peter decided to fire him. Everything ended peacefully, and the Wilkinson family lost contact with him. After only a couple of months, Peter found Aaron sleeping next to their house, covered in bruises, which indicated that he had been attacked. They decided to give Aaron another chance, helped him find a new place to live, and he earned money doing odd jobs for them. He spent Christmas with them and gave Tracy a card signed, "For the mother I never had." For the new year, Aaron had a new flat in Brierley Hill, and he now had a full-time job. A couple of times a week, he had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and it seemed that everything was getting better. Unfortunately, soon after, Aaron was fired from his job as a furniture polisher, and he lost his home. The Wilkinsons allowed him to stay with them again for 2 weeks until he found a job. On March 26, 2017, Lydia returned home from university and surprised her mother by hiding in the family Land Rover for Mother's Day. When Tracy opened the trunk and saw Lydia, they both cried tears of joy at their reunion. What a pity, Lydia's visit was brief, as she soon had to leave for Bristol to continue her studies. Just 4 days later, on March 30, 2017, at around 10:00 a.m., Lydia received a distressing call from her boyfriend informing her that a crime had occurred in her hometown. Upon reading the news, Lydia saw images of her house surrounded by police tape and emergency services. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police to learn what had happened, and the news she received was horrifying. That day, Peter had taken his greyhound, Mendy, for their usual morning walk, leaving Tracy and Pierce at home. He had invited Pierce to join him, but Pierce declined, saying he would walk later. When Peter returned home, he noticed the house was unusually quiet, and there was no tea on the kitchen table, a routine his wife usually followed. As Peter entered the house, a man wearing a balaclava attacked him from behind the kitchen wall, raising a knife over his head. Peter suffered 6 stab wounds, 2 in his back, 2 in his stomach, and 2 in his face. During the assault, the attacker screamed, "Die," and curse. Although the attacker was trying to conceal his identity with the mask, Peter instantly recognized him. After the first stab, Peter pleaded, "We are trying to help you." But he responded with increasing rage, then shouting again, "Die," as he delivered another blow to Peter's stomach. Following the attack, Aaron stole the Wilkinsons' Land Rover parked outside and drove away. Despite serious injuries, Peter managed to call 911 and made his way to the garden, collapsing on a chair. Emergency services arrived in just 7 minutes. 2 ambulances and 2 helicopters were dispatched to quickly take the victims to hospital. When the police and medical staff arrived, they encountered a horrific scene inside the house. Peter directed them to Tracy and Pierce to check on their well-being. Police comments: Tracy had been stabbed at least 17 times and was found naked in her bedroom under a duvet, indicating she had been attacked while she was sleeping. She was pronounced dead at the crime scene. Her son, Pierce, suffered 8 stab wounds, one of which was so severe that it nearly ruptured his back. He was found gasping for air on the floor. Right away, Peter and Pierce was rushed to Birmingham for medical attention, but sadly, Peter lost both his wife and son. After police tracked the Wilkinson family's car, they quickly located Aaron. So, he was quickly apprehended. Why? A bloody knife wrapped in a wet shirt was also discovered in the car. For Lydia, the unfolding nightmare was unimaginable. She had planned to return home the following day to choose a dress for the university ball and had promised Pierce she would pick him up from school. Now, all those plans would never come to fruition. As soon as she arrived in her hometown, she went directly to her father before his life-saving surgery. Seeing him in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and tubes, was heartbreaking. While Peter fought for his life, Lydia had the painful task of identifying the bodies of her younger brother and mother. Lydia recalled, "I went into the house and sat with my mom and brother. I told them I was sorry I couldn't protect them and stroked their hair. I decided to stay there for a while because I knew it would be the last time I would see them." After the doctor's efforts, Peter survived and spent a total of 11 days in the hospital, 6 of which were in intensive care. The community in Stonebridge was shocked by such a horrific event in their town. In a show of respect, flowers were placed around Wilkinson's house. Many people came to express their sorrow. Meanwhile, the police obtained surveillance camera footage from Wilkinson's house, revealing a disturbing sequence of events. The footage showed Aaron climbing over the fence into the garden behind the house. He had been hiding in the garden shed all night after failing to break into the house. In the morning, he waited for Peter to leave for his usual walk, then crawled into the house on all fours to avoid detection. Once inside, He put on a balaclava to conceal his identity, took 2 knives from the kitchen, and went upstairs. There, he brutally stabbed Tracy multiple times in her bed and did the same to Pierce. After the attack, he hid to waiting for Peter to return. After the murder, Aaron showed no remorse. He told a police officer, "I stabbed 3 people. I didn't even bother to take any of you." He also mentioned to the police officer that he had chopped them all up and insisted he wouldn't require a lawyer. Additionally, Aaron declined to take a toxicology test that could have established if he was under the influence of banned substance that morning. He also refused to explain his motives. While in custody, he boasted about killing a mother and her son and expressed satisfaction that they were dead. His only regret was failing to kill Peter. One uncertainty is why he committed this crime. Less than a week before the murder, the Wilkinson family ended their contract with Aaron's phone service because he hadn't contacted them for 3 weeks. Tracy had also mentioned to friends that she saw Aaron peering over their garden fence and had wished for his disappearance from their lives. Investigators said, Aaron has a long history of violent and antisocial behavior. At the age of 11, he was abandoned by his foster family because of his aggressive actions towards other children. As he grew older, his violence escalated, particularly towards residents in the nursing home where he lived, and he claimed to be very disturbed. He frequently got into fights and even stole a staff member's car. At one point, he made a list of people he wanted to kill. Aaron has 21 prior convictions, the first occurring when he was just 12 years old for causing serious injury. His other offenses include assaulting a police officer, using illegal banned substance, and possessing illegal weapons. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend with a piece of wood, hitting her 50 times, and attempted to stab her after she broke the wood in half. For this assault, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison at the age of 18. Volunteers at the rehabilitation center where Aaron was held reported that he expressed a desire to kill someone with a knife. They also noted that he had 2 main goals: to kill a prison officer and to kill a police officer. However, his comments were largely dismissed since they believed he made these statements while under the influence of illegal banned substance. Before, he attended a special school, but his social interactions were limited, as everyone who knew him avoided him. Additionally, a police report was filed against him after his former foster guardian became alarmed by his Facebook posts. In one of these posts, he threatened his former family, with whom he claimed he hadn't spoken in years, and expressed a desire for specialized help, warning that he might commit mass murder if he didn't receive it. In February 2017, just a month before he murdered the Wilkinson family, he met with a project employee for support. This employee concluded that Aaron sought to manipulate the people around him and to have absolute control over them, calculating every step he took. In one of his text messages, Aaron wrote that he was a beast, adding, "Stay a beast, change the victim." On Wednesday, June 7, 2017, Pierce and Tracy Wilkinson's funeral was held at St. Mary's Church. Lydia and Peter decided to bury both of their loved ones in the same coffin. The priest who presided over the ceremony was moved to say, "You may be surprised to see only one coffin, but they are forever inseparable, just as they were together when they were alive." On the first day of his trial at Birmingham Crown Court, Aaron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. As the judge read the charges against him, Aaron rocked back and forth in the dock and shouted, "I did what I did. I don't have to stand here and lie." Psychiatric evaluations found no grounds for mitigating Aaron Barley's guilt. Prosecutor Kareem Khalil described Aaron as deceitful and manipulative. One of Aaron's former caregivers noted that he could be sensitive and caring, but he could also be cruel and threatening. A former resident of the nursing home where Aaron lived said that, aside from anger, he rarely showed any emotion. They never saw Aaron cry and noted that he rarely seemed affected by anything that happened around him. They observed that Aaron was the type of person who could witness terrible things happening and still stand still, not crying, not worrying. He seemed physically present, but completely detached emotionally. Aaron's attorney argued that Aaron's childhood was unstable, preventing him from staying in one place for long. He claimed that Aaron had borderline personality disorder and felt abandoned by his family. However, this diagnosis was never confirmed because it was widely acknowledged that the Wilkinson family had treated him with exceptional kindness. In court, Lydia Wilkinson confronted Aaron, stating, "My parents helped you, and you repay them with emotional suffering. You ruined lives and took half of my family away. I have become a shadow of my former self. Sometimes I wake up wishing I wasn't here. What did they do to deserve such a fate?" She also expressed that she would never forgive Aaron for his actions. After her statement, it appeared that Aaron began to cry and softly said, "And I'm very sorry." The judge commended Lydia for her courage and maturity, noting that she had shown strength beyond her years. However, he pointed out that Lydia was struggling with anxiety attacks and could no longer be left alone. Peter, who also testified, expressed confusion about Aaron's actions, saying, "We have no explanation for what he did. He chose to take out his frustrations on the people who cared for him. I wish I had never met him. I wish my wife hadn't seen him in the cardboard box." Aaron Barley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole. While the judge gave him this opportunity, she also warned him that Aaron might never be released, depending entirely on his behavior and rehabilitation while serving his sentence. However, Aaron remained expressionless throughout the trial, showing no reaction. The three-judge panel then decided to increase the minimum sentence to 35 years, reflecting the severity of Aaron's crimes. Now, Aaron will only be eligible for parole after serving at least 35 years and proving that he is no longer a threat to society. Whether or not he will ever be free is a question that only time will tell. Peter and Lydia continued to live in their home on Greyhound Lane. Peter said, "This is our home, and we couldn't let him take anything else away from us. We love this house. It's like a family home that we built ourselves, and we love living here." They also received support from a local priest, who blessed each room in the house. Lydia returned to university with the hope of becoming a medical researcher. She said she wanted to continue the work her mother would do, helping and supporting others, and that it was important to her to focus her energy on making something positive out of the tragedy. Lydia raised £133,000 British pounds for Birmingham Children's Hospital, which fought so hard to save her brother's life. While the loss of Tracy and Pierce can never be replaced, but their legacy will live on through the children that Lydia's organizations have cared for. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Debany Escobar. These events took place in the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, on April 9, 2022. A disturbing image appeared on social media. In the photo, a young girl was standing on the side of the road. She was wearing a white top, brown shorts, and black Converse shoes, and her hair was down. The caption of the post with the photo said, "Yes, it's true." The girl's name was Debany Escobar. She was 18 years old. The last time she was seen was late on the night of April 9 after a party where she was with her friends. It all started on Friday, April 8, when Debany, a student at the Faculty of Law at the University of Nuevo León in Monterrey, decided to go for a walk with her friends. At about 11 p.m., she left her house. Two of her friends, Sarai and Vaughn, met her on Simon Bolivar Street to go to a party together. At 11:30 p.m., a CCTV camera from one of the stores recorded how the three girls were buying drinks. They were there for some time and then decided to go to the party just a few blocks away. However, upon arrival, they found themselves in an unpleasant situation, which led them to decide to go to another party taking place at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo. They ordered a taxi using the Didi app, which came to pick them up at 12:49 a.m. When they arrived at the location, it became clear that the party had already ended. However, the girls noticed that not far away, on the same street, another party was taking place, called Cantal Diamant. The surveillance Sierra footage shows the girls getting out of a white Kia Rio at 1:20 a.m. And only Sarai and Dabani exited the car. A little later, they reached the entrance to the club. After 9 minutes, the camera filmed Dabani walking in the opposite direction from the entrance. After a few seconds, she returned and everything seemed fine. But at 3:45 a.m., the camera recorded Dabani running out of the club. A young man ran after her and tried to grab her. She hit him and tried to run away, but he did not let her. After that, they began to quarrel, and another guy came out to witness the altercation. After that, the girls called a familiar driver to pick them up. The driver informed her that he was nearby and would arrive in 10 or 15 minutes. A moment later, when the driver arrived, Dabani got in the car, leaving her friends behind. Another camera recorded the car, showing that Dabani was arguing with the driver. 8 minutes later, the driver sent a message to her friend, stating that Dabani had exited the car and refused to continue the ride. The driver informed that there had been an argument between him and Dabani, due to which she chose to leave the car and did not want to return. He took the photo as proof that he left her on the side of the road. Dabani's friends were uncertain about what to do next. They asked the driver to contact the police, but he declined, stating he had to leave for work. A few minutes later, he returned to the area, but Dabani was no longer there. He informed her friends that she was missing and suggested that Dabani appeared to be in poor condition, potentially under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was incoherent. The friends attempted to contact her parents, but no one answered. The conversation between the driver and Dabani's friends ended at 5:16 a.m., and since then, they had not heard from her. The next day, Dabani's friends were able to contact her father, Mario Escobar, they wanting to find out what had happened. Her parents were also unaware of the situation, and they promptly filed a report with the police. Photos of Dabani were shared on social media, and a search effort began. On April 9, while authorities were looking for Dabani, the body of a missing girl named Maria Fernanda Contreras was discovered in a house in the Apodaca area. This was one of 5 bodies found during the search for Dabani. Within just 6 days, the remains of these 5 women were uncovered, which left the community in shock. 2 days after Dabani went missing, a girl who was also at the party that Dabani attended told on her Instagram that some people tried to help Dabani and offered to take her home so that she could come to her senses. However, Dabani's friend did not want this, since supposedly some trusted person was supposed to come for them, so the story took on a different character. Now Dabani's friends were the main suspects. All this was very strange, and as time went on, the case became more and more complicated. At that point, the investigation had made little progress. On April 15, a reward of 100,000 Mexican pesos was announced for information about Dabani. From this reward, the prosecutor's office in Nuevo León obtained a video showing Dabani at 4:29 a.m., just 4 minutes after the driver had photographed her. In the video, she is seen walking toward the building of the international transport company Alcocia. She then crossed the road and approached the building's facade and vanished. With access to this video, it was believed that Dabani might have gone to the transport company for help. However, the camera did not capture her entering or exiting the building. This was the last footage of Dabani, leading to suspicions that the transport company could be involved in her disappearance. So, there was still hope of finding Dabani alive. On April 19, the police initiated a search of the Alcocia company building. They examined all vehicles and accessed surveillance cameras, but found nothing of interest. Following this, they conducted a search in a residential building in central Monterrey, located 22 kilometers from where Dabani was last seen. The police received tips that Dabani's personal belongings were in apartment number 18. 2 days earlier, the GPS on her phone indicated activity in that location, as well as at the corner of the Nueva Castilla motel. The following day, police, volunteers, and canine units searched the nearby highway for evidence. They inspected a manhole in a vacant lot next to the Nueva Castilla motel. Additionally, workers from the Monterrey Water Service searched a manhole along the highway where she was last seen. However, at that point, the investigation had made little progress. At the request of Mario, a team from the National Search Commission was called in to assist with the search. That Thursday afternoon, a group of volunteers joined the effort. Police received reports from the staff at the Nueva Castilla motel about a foul odor coming from an unused tank. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, and within minutes, they discovered a body. Although it was initially unclear if the body belonged to Debani, divers confirmed that it was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Mario identified her by a cross she was wearing. The police also requested security camera footage from the motel, but the staff claimed the cameras only displayed live footage and did not record. Meanwhile, Debani's body had been submerged in water for nearly 2 weeks, making it nearly unrecognizable and in a state of decomposition. Despite the clothing and accessories, DNA testing was necessary for identification. An autopsy conducted confirmed that the body was indeed Debani's, and the cause of death was determined to be a severe head injury by strong impact. Initial reports suggested that Debani's fall into the tank was not accidental, and her phone lost signal shortly after. There were no signs of violence on her body. The bruises might have been caused by a fall. However, there was swelling on her forehead and around her eyes, indicating inflammation from impact. At that time, it was believed that Debani could not have jumped over the 2-meter-high wall surrounding the motel to accidentally fall into a cistern that measured 90 by 98 centimeters and was 4.43 meters deep, with a water level of 90 centimeters. Because Debani was only 167 centimeters tall and the wall had barbed wire on top. Before the discovery, Debani's body, no one, including service dogs, noticed any unpleasant odors at the motel. Nueva Castilla had 3 tanks, with one of them clogged. In the first tank, where the body was found, they found her Converse sneakers and a piece of fabric with insects typically found on decomposing bodies. On the wall between the first and second tanks, a bag belonging to Debani was located. This bag contained a red plastic container, a white bra, 2 pieces of beige fabric, and a black and white fabric mask. In the second tank, investigators found a yellow and white lighter, 3 metal keys, a cell phone in a damaged black case, a wallet, and a plastic-wrapped gel-like substance. Conducting toxicology tests to check for alcohol or other substances in her system proved difficult. However, the presence of insects and worms feeding on the corpse might allow for DNA extraction to identify substances. The investigation agency analyzed that Nueva Castilla motel is not well known and appears abandoned from the outside. It sits along the highway leading to New Laredo, the main route between Monterrey and the United States. This highway has earned a reputation for danger, as approximately 1,000 people went missing there last year. They found no signs of a break-in near the tanks, leading them to conclude that Debani likely entered the motel through the main entrance of the restaurant. 2 days after the body was found, security camera footage from the motel was released. This was unusual because the staff had previously stated that the cameras only recorded in real time. The footage provided by the prosecutor's office shows the motel's restaurant and 2 glass doors, one facing the highway and the other leading to the tank area inside the motel. In the footage, Debani is seen entering the motel at 4:33 a.m. Another camera captures her running to the motel, going around the restaurant, and reaching the glass door. When she noticed no one was there, she dashed to the corner of the restaurant, where she stayed for about 20 minutes. Then, she ran again along the wall of the hotel. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Following a review of the surveillance footage, the prosecutor's office requested that the motel be placed under check. Investigators discovered that an outdoor camera at a neighboring restaurant recorded a car parked at the Nueva Castilla motel, where a man entered. They was believed that this man took Debani away in that car. Days later, the car was identified, and the man who got in was also revealed. However, after being questioned, he was declared innocent of the case. Meanwhile, Mario sought external assistance to carry out a second autopsy and compare its findings with those of the first. Everyone was left wondering why Debani exited the taxi that was supposed to take her home. New footage that surfaced in the media suggested that her departure might have been prompted by harassment from the taxi driver. In the video, the driver is seen extending his right hand toward the girl's chest, leading to speculation that she left the car due to his inappropriate behavior. In response to these allegations, taxi driver Juan appeared in the media on April 27 to share his side of the story. In the interview, Juan David denied any harassment, explaining that the footage actually captured him handing Debani a phone charger because her phone battery had died. And he said his conversations with Debani's friend, he shared an audio recording he made while Debani was in his car. In the recording, she states, "My parents deserve the truth." Juan explained that she got into the car because she felt her friends from the party were bad influences. They didn't want to see her off. Debani started crying, and Juan noted that she appeared to be in distress, possibly under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was unclear. He mentioned that, when he requested her home address to take her there, but she didn't respond. He then asked her friend for Debani's mother's phone number, but they didn't have one. While driving on the highway, Debani unexpectedly asked him to stop the car and then exited. Juan tried to persuade her to return while she stood by the roadside, but she did not come back. Then, he took a photo of Debani and sent it to Debani's friends to alert them to her location. Two of Debani's friends also gave an interview on television. The girls mentioned that at the party, Debani was aggressive and did not accept help from anyone. She asked to be left alone. Sarai learned that Debani had a disagreement with a group of people who wanted to take her home, which caused her to act oddly. Her friends suspected that something was wrong with her drink at the party, leading to her withdrawal from socializing with others. Eventually, she ran out of the club, and some guys tried to stop her. Others also came out to assist Debani, but she reacted aggressively and insisted that they leave her alone. She mentioned that her parents were lawyers and offered money to anyone who would let her be. The girls ordered a taxi, using the same driver they had trusted before. When the taxi arrived, only Debani got in, while this driver is different from the driver they want to see again. After leaving the party, the girls attempted to call Debani's father multiple times between 3:50 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., but he did not answer. It wasn't until 8:35 a.m. that they finally reached him to ask if Debani had made it home, only to discover that she was missing. One significant piece of evidence that prompted further investigation was a promotional video from the motel, which featured a song. The video not only showcased the motel, but also zoomed in on room 174. This raised suspicions that a motel worker might have been hinting at what happened in that room. As a result, the initial search lasted about 7 hours and yielded some evidence, along with previously overlooked surveillance footage. At the request of Debani's parents, room 174 was examined for blood traces, both inside the room and in the parking lot. The prosecutor's office announced that 5 individuals present at the motel that night have already been interviewed. A white truck was noted to have arrived shortly after Debani entered the hotel grounds. However, the last 8 or 9 minutes of the footage were missing, and they might contain crucial clues for solving the case. Experts are currently working to recover the potentially deleted records. On May 5, it was reported that Debani's ID stolen from her 2.5 months prior during a robbery was discovered. A resident of Building 15, where a search had already taken place, found the ID in a flower bed of the residential complex. Nonetheless, this find has not yet contributed to solving the case. Then, new information was reported in the media. Mario accused the Nuevo Leon prosecutor's office of hiding the results of a second autopsy on Debani's body. In there, the findings indicate that she did not suffer multiple blows to the head from blunt objects. However, medical examiners noted bruises on both sides of her head, her forehead, both eyelids, the left side of her nose, her lips, and around her ears. The report suggests that the varying severity of head injuries was likely caused by external impact, pointing to the likelihood that these injuries were inflicted by another person, this indicating a violent death rather than an accident. Furthermore, it was determined that Debanye died before entering the water, as no water was found in her lungs. The report also revealed bruises and hematomas in the genital area, suggesting abuse violence. It dismissed the possibility of strangulation since there were no injuries to her neck. This has highlighted the persistent negligence of the police. It is troubling that, in today's world, the authorities are not trustworthy. The case of Debanye Susana Escobar is not only a personal tragedy, but also a powerful reminder of the violence against women in Mexico. To date, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with her death, leaving her family and the public questioning the justice system and the safety of women in society. Debanye has become a symbol of the fight against gender-based violence, a problem that affects an average of 10 women every day in Mexico. Despite protests and constant pressure from the community, the investigation and prosecution process has been slow, leaving the quest for justice for these young women a significant question mark. Debanye's death has not only left her family heartbroken, but has also sparked outrage and a determination for change in society. But will this voice and struggle be enough to bring justice and end similar tragedies? The answer still lies in the future. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Russell Rusty and Rebecca Becky Porter. Russell Rusty and his wife, Rebecca Becky Porter, bought a farm in Willard, Missouri, USA, in 1957. At the time, it was a small settlement with a close-knit community where everyone knew one another. The crime rate was low, and life was peaceful, quiet. On April 19, 2011, Rebecca, aged 40, unexpectedly missed her scheduled shift at work. She hadn't mentioned any health issues beforehand, which raised concern among her coworkers and later her supervisors. That morning, the family's neighbor stepped out onto the porch and noticed Rebecca's car still parked outside. Rebecca typically left for work early, as she usually woke up at around 7:30 and left the house by 8 a.m. thinking she might be feeling unwell. The neighbor decided to check on her. However, when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. At first, he assumed she might be resting due to fatigue and didn't think much of it. But as the day went on and the house remained silent, his concern began to grow. Later, Rebecca's daughter, Jessica, arrived at the house, concerned because she hadn't been able to reach her mother by phone. The neighbor informed Jessica about the unusual situation. Together, they knocked on the door, but still, no one answered. When they peered through a window, they saw the house in disarray, leading them to contact the police. Their call followed an earlier one placed by Rebecca's son, who had already reached out to law enforcement after being unable to contact his mother. He expressed his concern and requested a welfare check for the Porter family. When the patrol arrived at the house, they were immediately hit by a strong smell of cleaning products, noticeable even from the porch. The officers inspected the property and peered through the windows. Inside, they found the house in total disarray, particularly in the kitchen and the main bedroom. In the bedroom, the bed was out of order, the mattress tilted, the blanket pulled off, and belongings like a handbag and a mobile phone scattered across the floor. There were clear signs of a struggle, which made the house resemble a crime scene. In the kitchen, they discovered a cut window screen, suggesting it might have been used as the entry point for a burglary. The situation seemed to point to a break-in. However, upon entering the house, the officers uncovered something that didn't support the burglary theory. Surprisingly, many valuable items were untouched despite the chaotic state. Rebecca and Russell were nowhere to be found, fueling suspicions of foul play. The police's findings prompted them to seal off the area and launch an investigation into possible kidnappings. When Rebecca's son arrived at the farm, he assisted the police by providing helpful insights. What deeply concerned him was the presence of his stepfather's medication, which was still at the house. Russell, his stepfather, relied on these pills every day after medical treatment, and Russell would never leave them behind if he left the house. Rebecca's wallet, which she always carried with her, was found in the marital bedroom. Her car remained parked outside the house, and inside the car were her bank cards, with the key left in the ignition. This raised serious concerns, as it was clear something alarming had occurred. Although the house had a strong smell of cleaning products, only one bottle of bleach was found, and it was still full. No empty containers of cleaning products were discovered, yet it was evident they had been used very recently. This seemed suspicious. Someone had likely discarded them after use. It appeared the perpetrator had quickly poured bleach over various areas in an attempt to erase evidence, with pools of bleach still visible in some spots. The police found a computer monitor under the table, but the rest of the system was missing. It appeared to have been disassembled, as some wires were still present. Upon investigation, the police discovered that this computer managed multiple cameras located both inside and outside the house. The theft of the system unit meant all the stored data had also been taken. It was clear the perpetrator had stolen the evidence to prevent it from falling into the detectives' hands. Additionally, it was determined that all the cameras were connected to a single security system. The system had sent out an alarm prior to the incident, but no response was received. Investigators noted the unusually large number of CCTV cameras, which covered the entire property without any blind spots. Such extensive security measures in a quiet, safe neighborhood raised suspicions. Many assumed the system was installed to comfort Rebecca, whose nerves and fearfulness had grown with age. However, the situation was concerning since they lived in an area where residents were familiar with one another and serious crimes had not occurred in years. The police theorized that they might have felt threatened or frightened by someone, possibly an enemy, who acted against them. The stolen cleaning products indicated that the criminal might have been trying to erase evidence of blood, leading investigators to fear the worst. However, Rebecca and Russell's children rejected this idea. They argued their parents had no enemies, were peaceful by nature, and rarely engaged in conflicts, let alone provoke someone to commit a crime. The neighbors were also shocked by the news. The Porters were viewed as deeply religious and upstanding people, attending church every Sunday and frequently participating in neighborhood events. They seemed friendly to everyone. However, people who knew the family better informed police about Russell's troubled past. Before meeting Rebecca, he had struggled with alcohol and substance addiction, which raised the possibility of him relapsing into old habits, accruing debts, or associating with dangerous individuals. However, there were no recent signs of such behavior. Rebecca made great efforts to help Russell overcome his problems and prevent relapse. Many neighbors heard these speculations, and rumors began spreading. Some even believed a Mexican cartel might have been involved in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police explored different possibilities, such as one spouse harming the other and fleeing, or both voluntarily ending their lives together. Bloodstains were discovered in the house despite attempts to clean, reinforcing the police's theory of a violent crime. However, even by the third day of the investigation, there were no concrete leads or evidence. Rebecca and Russell were officially declared missing, and the search efforts intensified. Authorities suspected at least one person had been harmed in the house. Suspicion grew as both spouses had left behind essential personal belongings they used daily, suggesting they might both be victims. Neighbors and friends were left wondering and trying to figure out what had happened to Rebecca and Russell. Everyone was bewildered by their sudden and inexplicable disappearance. As more time passed without any sign of them, anxiety grew among family members and local residents. Disturbing rumors spread throughout the community, creating fear among the public. Approximately 5,000 flyers featuring pictures of Rebecca and Russell were printed. Family members and volunteers distributed them widely, placing them at gas stations, grocery stores, truck stops, and other areas frequented by locals. The local cycling community has joined in a search effort, assisting by interviewing residents for clues to Rebecca and Russell's whereabouts. A reward has been offered, and detectives have been working closely with relatives and friends of the family to gather information about the surroundings, identify possible suspects, such as the kidnapper or killer. They also investigated any recent or past conflicts the Porters might have had with other people. Through this, it was revealed that a family member, Robert Campbell, had been involved in a dispute with Russell. Robert, who drove a pickup truck, lived near the Russells and became the primary suspect in their disappearance. Detectives begin investigating his life and relationships, uncovering a long-standing conflict between him and the Russell family. Their disputes often escalated into heated arguments, and about 3 weeks before Rebecca and Russell vanished, the tension reached a breaking point. Both parties obtained restraining orders against each other. Naturally, detectives approached Robert at his home to question him about the incident leading up to Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. It was revealed that Robert had been claiming ownership of the family farm, even though he had no legal rights to it. Previously, Robert had lived on the property until new owners, Russell, who inherited the farm from his grandfather, and his wife Rebecca, moved in. Robert was upset by this, believing that, as the former owner's son, he was entitled to the property. However, he had been excluded from the will due to strained family relationships. Most of the conflict revolved around the farm. Robert proposed splitting the farm with Russell, but Russell refused and presented the ownership documents. This refusal fueled Robert's resentment. Robert believed his claims were valid because, prior to Russell and Rebecca moving in, he had worked on the house. He had renovated the facade, built a second floor, and invested time, money into improving the property. Nevertheless, when Russell took over, they effectively evicted him and dismissed his investments as irrelevant. Rebecca and Russell explained to Robert that, according to the legal documents, he had no rights to the property. His investments did not entitle him to any portion of the farm. Despite this, Robert felt wronged. He demanded that Rebecca and Russell either vacate the property, share ownership, or at least compensate him for his expenses. Unfortunately, they were unable to reach any form of agreement. The situation escalated, and it was clear that no resolution would come from the Supreme Court. This created an opportunity for Robert to remove both Rebecca and Russell, as well as seize their property. Detectives observed that Robert was behaving very possessively toward the property that originally belonged to Russell's grandparents and had not been passed down to him. He held deep resentment toward the family, particularly Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, due to ongoing conflicts, he moved his new trailer about half a kilometer away from the farmhouse. Robert seemed to have a strong motive for violent actions, including an attack, kidnapping, or even murder, given the long-standing disputes with the family. Although Robert denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance, claimed that he had an alibi, the evidence complicated matters. On the day of the incident, he was reportedly 150 kilometers away in another city on a business trip with his wife. Despite this alibi, police appeared to piece together a narrative suggesting his involvement. Robert, who lived only a few hundred meters away from the Russells, openly expressed interest in their property and became subject to a restraining order. The farm's CCTV cameras were likely installed due to concerns about him. Witnesses confirmed frequent arguments between Robert and the family. On one occasion, he was seen driving by their home, yelling out the window that their time there was limited, perceived by some as a threat. It was plausible that Robert could have hired someone to carry out the crime since he had a clear motive and might have wished to avoid direct involvement. But could he really harm his own relatives and their spouse? As investigations dug deeper, it was revealed that Robert harbored significant resentment toward them as recently as a year before their disappearance. Rebecca had previously been married before meeting Russell. Her first husband, Terrence, was a local church pastor. Their divorce was complex and highly controversial. 4 months after the split, Rebecca met Russell. At that time, Russell was battling an addiction to illegal substances and alcohol. However, after meeting Rebecca, she became a positive influence in his life, like a breath of fresh air. From the very beginning, she seemed determined to help him overcome his struggles. Russell later admitted that her presence gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Rebecca was more than 10 years older than Russell, which initially unsettled his family. However, they eventually accepted the relationship. On the other hand, Rebecca's family reacted much more negatively. Following her divorce, Rebecca lived with her children and parents, but they strongly disapproved of Russell. As a result, her children stayed with their grandparents and distanced themselves from their mother, upset by her decision to pursue a relationship with a much younger man who had serious addiction issues. In fact, they refused to attend Rebecca and Russell's wedding. The ongoing discord between Rebecca and Terrence wasn't unusual and didn't initially seem like a strong motive for the attack. However, the intricate divorce process brought up several questions, especially concerning a restaurant they had opened and co-owned during their marriage. Neither of them wanted to split the business during the divorce, which could have provided a financial motive for Terrence to target her and her new husband, Russell. At this stage of the investigation, detectives had not identified any other potential suspects. The focus shifted to two individuals, Uncle Robert Campbell, who had a strained relationship with Russell, and ex-husband Terrence Fraser, who might have financial grievances against Rebecca. Investigators approached Terrence, a church pastor, to learn more about his recent interactions with Rebecca. Unlike Robert, Terrence appears genuinely distressed from the start and seems deeply saddened by Rebecca's disappearance. His behavior stood in stark contrast to Robert's and showed no signs of recent conflict. Terrence had moved on with his life and appeared content, expressing sincere regret over the disagreements during their divorce. He admitted he could have been kinder at times and acknowledged his past mistakes with genuine remorse. The police continued to stay in contact with Rebecca's and Russell's relatives and friends during the investigation. One of Russell's friends shared some intriguing information. The family's property had been targeted by multiple crimes in the past. This suggested they might have had more enemies than anyone had realized. For instance, a few months before the disappearance, there had been an incident of agricultural theft on their farm. In response, Russell had installed video cameras on the property. Robert was also investigated for possible involvement. However, it was confirmed that he couldn't have committed the crime during that time because he was far from the city. Despite this, his intense dislike for Russell raised suspicions that he might have orchestrated the crime. At the time of the incident, Robert was working as a truck driver and was traveling to Texas. Separately, Terrence was also ruled out as a suspect through further checks. This led to the theory that the Porters might have had other, less obvious enemies unknown to the police. Eventually, the investigation appeared to hit a dead end. About a week after Russell and Rebecca disappeared, an unexpected development occurred. Early one morning, the station received a call reporting that Donald and Helen Willingham had been found stabbed to death in their home. The police immediately noticed several similarities between this case and the Porters. Both homes were broken into without warning, nothing of value was stolen, and the level of brutality was extreme. However, unlike the first incident, the bodies in this case were not removed, nor was there an attempt to clean up the crime scene. The reason? A neighbor had frightened the perpetrator. The witness even chased a man wearing a black hoodie for a short while but failed to catch him. The suspect managed to escape, but the neighbor promptly reported the incident to the police around 5 a.m. The investigation into the second case revealed troubling parallels. The Willingham family bore a striking resemblance to the Porters. Both women, Helen and Rebecca, were actively involved in their local church. Helen was married to Donald, the local church pastor, just as Rebecca had once been. This raised fears of a possible serial killer or a connection between the two families. Despite intense efforts by law enforcement, progress in both investigations was limited. The police thoroughly examined the relatives of the Willingham family, their close acquaintances, and the timeline leading up to the crime. As in the case of the Porter family, several suspects were identified, but each was ruled out after further questioning. Both cases appeared to be at a standstill until July 2011, when the situation took a turn. In that month, a man named Jose Huckleberry was taken into custody at the station, accused of committing a burglary in Greene County. During a 7-hour interrogation, he confessed to killing Donald and Helen but denied having any role in the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, investigators confirmed he could not have been responsible for the Porter's disappearance, as he had a solid alibi. Both the cases of the Porter family and the Willingham family exhibit striking similarities and notable differences, particularly regarding the motives and methods of the murderer. As a result, Jose was removed from the list of suspects in the Porter's family case. Later, a police informant who had recently been released from prison claimed to possess valuable information regarding the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. The informant stated that a prisoner named Tony had boasted during a conversation that he took away the birthdays of Rebecca and Russell, a phrase in criminal slang meaning that he killed them. Although the detectives were skeptical of this claim, they decided it was worth continuing to investigate the lead. The police began investigating Tony. They first reviewed the location data from his mobile phone to determine whether he might have been near the Porter's family's residence on the night of their disappearance. In parallel, they delved into Tony's background. The inquiry revealed that he had a history of burglary, primarily targeting electronics and household appliances. Notably, his criminal patterns seemed to align with the theft of items from the Porter family's home, including a computer system unit, potentially linking him to the case. At the time of the investigation, Tony was in jail awaiting charges for another burglary. Detectives arranged to speak with him directly, but Tony denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. The family recounted Tony's tumultuous past, claiming that he had experienced problems from a young age. He had consistently found himself in trouble and had been connected to the criminal world since his school years. Investigators interviewed Tony's family and uncovered a long-standing conflict among the family members. Some relatives hadn't seen Tony for years and were unaware of his circumstances. Others, like his cousin Dusty Hicks, remained in contact and actively cooperated with the investigation. Eventually, Tony revealed he might have information about a crime involving the Porters. He told the police he could lead them to a location where the Porters' bodies might be hidden, an old hut in the forest. Tony led the police to the site. As they neared the hut, a foul odor grew stronger. Once inside, the smell was overwhelming. In the floorboards, they found a hole concealing a grave filled with garbage and human remains. By this time, 3 months had passed since Rebecca and Russell had gone missing, and the condition of the bodies was severely deteriorated. Identification wasn't immediately possible, and forensic examination was necessary to confirm the victims' identities. Experts have confirmed, through dental records and DNA analysis, that the bodies belonged to Rebecca and Russell. The case was reclassified from a disappearance to a double murder. Investigators concluded that they had been attacked in the head at close range with a weapon. They was found wearing pajamas, suggesting they were likely attacked during the night or early morning while sleeping. It's strange when bodies are found deep in the forest, far from their homes. This area is difficult to access, and for a long time, the question arose, how could a stranger know about this place? The truth was later revealed. Tony's cousin, Dusty Hicks, was an accomplice. Dusty disclosed that Tony was part of a gang, which included several of his childhood friends. They often commit crimes, mainly by breaking into houses and stealing to unlawfully benefit from others' property. Until the Porter family's murders, the gang had no history of violent crimes. Dusty revealed that he, Tony, Wendy Friend, Tony's wife, and their son, Philip, were involved in the massacre. Investigators decided to examine their phone records. Suspicious messages were discovered between Tony, Wendy, Philip, and Dusty. On April 18, 2011, they were near the Porter's family house, but their devices were switched off a few hundred meters away from the farm. The suspects confessed during interrogation that a specific customer had offered them $100,000 to carry out a double murder. Tony, the oldest and most experienced among them, influenced Philip and the others to join the criminal plan, driven by the promise of money. According to their statements, they prepared by wrapping their hands in a special adhesive film to avoid leaving fingerprints. Before heading to the Porter's farm, they bought a can of bleach, which they later used to wipe away evidence at the crime scene. To disable the CCTV system, they cut the wires, triggering an alarm. After cutting through a fence, they entered the house through a window. Tony carried a weapon, while the others assisted him. He went into Rebecca and Russell's bedroom, brandished the weapon at them, who had awakened, and instructed the accomplices to restrain them using plastic ties. They were then abducted and taken away in a pickup truck to an isolated forest area. Rebecca and Russell were left near a cabin in the woods, where their bodies were later discovered. Philip, one of the suspects, disclosed that Tony and Dusty led them deeper into the forest. Approximately 10 minutes later, he heard the sound of weapons exploding, followed a few minutes later by another explosion, signaling the deaths of Rebecca and Russell. Their bodies were buried hastily in a makeshift grave. The perpetrators returned to the Porter's family home to clean up the crime scene and stole a computer containing footage from the CCTV cameras to eliminate incriminating evidence. The police focused on the person who ordered the crime, someone willing to pay $100,000 to kill two innocent people. Tony eventually revealed a name, Robert Campbell. It made sense to the investigators, as Robert, Russell's uncle, had more than one motive. He wanted revenge for being evicted, but there was something deeper. Russell and Rebecca knew a terrible secret about him, though the exact details were never revealed. Russell and Rebecca suspected that Robert was involved in illegal activities, specifically selling stolen equipment. They had gathered evidence and were planning to report him to the police. To prevent this, Robert turned to his friend Tony, who organized a group to carry out the murders. The entire gang was eventually arrested. Although Robert denied any involvement, insisting that he hadn't done it, the police dismissed his claims. The prosecutor charged all 5 individuals involved. Tony Friend admitted guilt in 2 counts of first-degree murder and received a life sentence without parole. Dusty Hicks was sentenced to 2 life terms. Wendy Friend also received a life sentence. Philip Friend cooperated with authorities, testifying against the others, which led to a reduced sentence. Robert Campbell went to trial, and despite the evidence being circumstantial, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Even Robert's wife, Carolyn, faced potential prosecution for aiding him in committing perjury, but she ended her life before any charges could be filed. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Karen Leylen Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was born in 1987 in Bolivia and later moved to Guaymalan, Argentina. He is the oldest of 7 siblings and started working at the age of 14 to support his parents. In his youth, Rolando met Carolina Chavez, and in 2007, they had a son together. They eventually separated. Later, he entered a relationship with Maria Soledad Guardia, with whom he had another son, Elias. Despite their breakup, Rolando remained involved in his children's lives. Elias cherished his father and enjoyed spending time with him, even after his parents parted ways. Meanwhile, Rolando maintained relationships with his ex-wives and always prioritized his sons, ensuring that he remained in contact despite not living with them. Eventually, Rolando started a relationship with Karen Leylen Oviedo. Karen is an outgoing and friendly woman, born on March 30, 1990. In 2016, they moved in together and started their own business. Besides running a business with Karen, Rolando also worked at a market that specialized in wholesale fruit sales. To the neighbors, Rolando and Karen appeared loving and happy. However, it was clear that Karen was the dominant figure in their relationship. Someone once shared that Rolando had caught her in a car with her lover and reacted violently, almost destroying the vehicle. Despite this incident, things eventually calmed down, and he forgave her. Based on their social media photos, the two seemed to share genuine affection and enjoyed being together. Before meeting Rolando, Karen already had 2 daughters. One of the fathers of her daughters is Raul Ojeda, whom she married in 2013. After a while, Raul left his family. He was originally the owner of a successful shoe store, earning a good income, while Karen worked at a clothing boutique. Over time, the family encountered financial difficulties, which made the atmosphere unbearable. Feeling threatened, he made the decision to leave. Pretending he needed to buy something, he secretly fled the city, traveled to another country, and intentionally changed buses multiple times until arriving in Paraguay. He made sure his movements were untraceable to the residents of Noto. Elias, the youngest son of Ronaldo and his ex-wife, frequently visits his father. They made it a point to spend the 2019 holidays together, which Elias greatly enjoyed. However, according to Karen, Elias was somewhat distant in his interactions with her and her family. In the summer of 2019, Elias went to see Rolando and Karen again. At that time, the boy, who was 9 years old, was excited to turn all the plans he had discussed with his father into reality. On the morning of July 12, 2019, before heading to work, Rolando checked on Elias in his room to wish him good morning. He immediately noticed the boy was unwell and decided to take him to a children's hospital. After doctors examined Elias, it became clear that his condition was critical and required urgent care in the intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, young Elias passed away after hours in a coma. Relatives revealed that Elias had left home without showing any unusual symptoms and arrived at his father's house appearing healthy. However, the medical report stated that he succumbed to third-degree poisoning, which led to multiple organ failure and cerebral thrombosis. Since his medical records showed he was a healthy boy, doctors requested an additional forensic examination. Nevertheless, Elias's mother and grandmother refused the procedure, considering it too harsh for the deceased. Karen suggested cremation but then decided against it. She chose to bury Elias in a private cemetery, where she could visit and leave flowers. Rolando, devastated by his son's death, gradually healed as time went by. 16 months after the tragedy, he proposed to Karen, and the two married. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On February 7, 2022, 35-year-old Rolando suddenly fell ill. He experienced severe vomiting before losing consciousness in his living room. Emergency services were called immediately. Karen opened the door to let the medical team in, and they found Rolando still lying on the floor. After regaining consciousness, Rolando was transported to the Santa Maria Clinic via ambulance, although another account suggests Karen herself drove him to the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts to save Rolando, he did not survive and passed away on February 9. The cause of death was determined to be severe poisoning. His sudden and unexpected death brought up many questions. Given that Rolando was healthy and regularly participated in sports, the medical staff interviewed his wife to gather more information. When asked if Rolando was taking any medications, Karen replied that he was. She said that her husband had been taking a medication to lighten dark spots on his skin. However, this information causes experts to be skeptical. Test results showed abnormally high levels of oxalate and calcium crystals in Rolando's body, which are classic signs of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient commonly found in car antifreeze. Given the unusual circumstances of Rolando's death and concerns raised by his family, authorities stepped in to investigate further. They ordered various forensic tests and interrogated Karen, who provided conflicting statements during questioning. As a result, she was detained for the investigation, and her phone was confiscated. Rolando's death deeply affected those close to him, including his friends and teammates. The news also shocked others in the community, including visitors to the warehouse, Raul, and local residents. People found it difficult to understand how a seemingly healthy man could pass away so suddenly and unexpectedly. Raul, Karen's ex-husband, was shocked when rumors began circulating about deliberate poisoning. He described Karen as affectionate and nonviolent during their marriage. Investigators questioned Karen about the substance she gave Rolando, and she claimed it was a remedy for skin spots, administered with a dropper. When asked to provide the bottle, Karen stated that their housekeeper had already discarded it. However, the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, contradicted Karen, asserting she hadn't disposed of the bottle. Claudia also mentioned overhearing a conversation where Rolando told Karen he disliked what she was giving him. The prosecutor's office initiated an investigation to gather information in Karen's household neighborhood. Neighbors reported seeing Karen repeatedly administering medications to her husband. Doubts were raised about the circumstances surrounding Rolando, prompting investigators to consider that Karen may have intended only to temporarily sedate her husband, rather than harm him. However, the Department for Technological Crimes dismissed this theory based on their findings. After examining Karen's phone, investigators discovered that she had searched for queries such as "what is the deadliest poison?" and "how to delete search history." Furthermore, evidence revealed that she had ordered ethylene glycol from an online store twice in the days leading up to her husband's death. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Agency for Toxic Substances, ethylene glycol is a synthetic liquid that absorbs water and is commonly used in the production of antifreeze. It is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is highly toxic to humans. Based on preliminary findings from the forensic examination conducted by the Supreme Court, investigators charged Karen with intentionally poisoning Rolando by diluting a toxic substance with orange juice. Consuming the drink caused Rolando to suffer severe poisoning over the weekend of February 5th and 6th, leading to a rapid decline in his health. He was admitted to the emergency room on Monday and subsequently passed away. By mid-February, authorities compiled sufficient evidence against Karen, and on February 16th, she was formally charged with aggravated murder. Rolando's death and the subsequent investigation raised suspicions about the circumstances surrounding the death of 9-year-old Elias. Authorities launched a new inquiry into Karen's potential involvement in the boy's death. Upon reviewing Elias's medical history, the prosecutor's office noted that Karen claimed he was healthy and energetic, but during a stay at his father's home, the child suddenly fell into a coma from which he never recovered. The death certificate stated that Elias died due to internal organ failure and brain thrombosis. However, investigators questioned whether such causes were plausible for a healthy child of his age. The prosecutor's office uncovered evidence linking Karen to the purchase of ethylene glycol. Store records confirmed that she purchased the substance on July 2, 2019, shortly before Elias moved into her household. Furthermore, Elias's relatives revealed that Karen had strongly advocated for cremating the boy's remains, despite his biological mother opposing the idea and choosing burial instead. Based on the accumulated evidence, prosecutor Claudia Rios charged Karen with aggravated murder on March 4, alleging that she had poisoned Elias. On March 14, the court approved a pretrial detention order for Karen. Although she appealed the decision, the judge upheld the ruling, requiring her to remain in custody until the trial. The trial commenced on Monday, November 28, 2022, at the criminal court in Mendoza, nearly 10 months after the alleged incident. The case focused on Karen and two separate charges, the murder of Elias and the murder of Rolando. Prosecutor Gustavo Fellman handled the first charge, while prosecutor Claudia Rios managed the second. Javier Aquino, Rolando's eldest son and 15 years old at the time, acted as the plaintiff, supported by legal representation. In their opening statements, the prosecution argued that Karen had murdered Elias and later Rolando by giving them orange juice mixed with ethylene glycol. This toxic substance caused severe poisoning, ultimately leading to multiple organ failure. Karen's defense, however, challenged the prosecution's allegations, contending that there was no direct evidence linking her to the crimes. The defense attorney also highlighted that Karen lacked a clear motive for the murders, as she had already secured ownership of the house, 2 cars, and the family business. Additionally, they refuted the prosecution's assertion that Karen had used her phone to make suspicious purchases or research ethylene glycol online, undermining allegations that she had previously used the poison to harm Elias. While condemning the actions that led to the deaths as deplorable, the defense reminded the court that no conviction should occur unless guilt is conclusively proven. Karen, labeled by the media as the poisoner, took the stand after the initial testimonies concluded. Following a request from her lawyer, the judge permitted her to speak. Karen firmly declared her innocence, stating that she had been falsely accused of committing a heinous crime. She expressed her distress at the idea that someone was trying to frame her as the murderer. Her lawyer emphasized to the jury that the accusations against her were baseless. Karen claimed that Rolando may have hacked into her account to purchase antifreeze. According to her testimony, when the package containing antifreeze arrived, Rolando told her not to touch it, left the house, and took the parcel with him. Karen also stated that she had a verifiable alibi. On February 6, the day Rolando began to feel unwell, she claimed that she wasn't at home. Instead, she had gone to a beauty salon and then to the gym, returning later to find her husband already vomiting. During her statement, Karen criticized the prosecutors, accusing them of immorality for implicating her, a mother of 2 young daughters, in the murder of a child, Elias. The prosecution then requested permission to cross-examine Karen. They asked if she had suggested cremating Elias. She denied this, asserting that it was not her decision and that she had never said anything of the sort. During the trial, prosecutors introduced various witnesses, including family members of Elias. Maria, Elias's mother, testified that after her son's death, Rolando told her about Karen suggesting cremating the boy's body so that each family could keep the ashes for 1 week. However, Maria rejected this suggestion. She also told the jury that during a meeting at the cemetery, Rolando mentioned Karen's jealousy, claiming she even slept in a separate bed because of it. Carolina, who is Rolando's first wife, also testified. She confirmed that, according to Rolando, he and Karen slept in separate beds. Carolina mentioned that she had never met or spoken to Karen before. However, on the morning of February 8, Karen called her directly to report that Rolando was ill and had been hospitalized. During the conversation, Karen mentioned that Rolando might have taken some medication that caused him to feel unwell. She also asked Carolina for help unlocking Rolando's phone, saying she suspected he might be involved with another woman. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as he had appeared perfectly fine just days earlier when they met. She explained that when they arrived at the clinic, Karen went ahead to speak with the doctors, while she was asked to wait outside because she was not allowed to enter. Carolina found the situation very strange. Determined to get answers, she contacted the doctor directly and demanded to know why she hadn't been allowed to see her ex-husband. The doctor explained that Rolando had lost consciousness, had not regained it, and was unresponsive to all treatments. Carolina then went to the secretary's office to file a formal complaint. During another conversation with Karen, Carolina learned that Rolando had taken syrup for a skin condition, which had caused an allergic reaction. Karen added that the bottle was no longer in the house, as the housekeeper had thrown it away. Karen also stated that she was covering all the medical expenses and told Carolina that there was no reason for her to stay any longer. Furthermore, Karen tried to convince Carolina that Rolando had expressed a wish to be cremated, suggesting that his ex-wife should support this decision. The jury also heard testimony from doctors, police officers, and expert witnesses during the trial. Among them was pediatrician Ivana Marinelli, who treated Elias during his hospitalization in July 2019. Dr. Marinelli explained that the boy had been brought to the hospital struggling to breathe and required emergency intubation. A CT scan revealed severe cerebral thrombosis, and intensive therapy was initiated. She confirmed that Elias's symptoms, such as altered consciousness, anxiety that escalated into a coma, were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning. After treatment, Elias's condition worsened rapidly. At approximately 5 p.m. on July 12, he suffered cardiac and respiratory arrest. The medical team attempted resuscitation for 50 minutes, with the boy's father present, but all efforts proved unsuccessful. At 6 p.m., the boy was pronounced dead. During the trial, the prosecutors presented the jury with a psychological report about Karen, based on Dr. Hayes' observations. Defense attorney Luis Torres argued that Karen had lied and concealed the truth. She painted Karen as someone who attempted to appear virtuous but was, in reality, unemotional, cruel, and uncooperative. The debate persisted while prosecutor Gustavo Fellman shared further details. Gustavo read from Karen's psychiatric report, highlighting the doctor's assessment of her relationships as being self-serving and primarily aimed at personal gain. The report also noted that Karen underwent a psychological evaluation shortly after the death of her husband, Rolando. However, she showed no signs of distress or emotional trauma over the loss. Describing Karen's personality, Gustavo stated that she was highly self-centered, concealed her negative attitudes toward others, exhibited overly controlled hostility, and harbored suppressed impulsive behaviors. There was no evidence to support Karen's claim of being a victim of gender-based violence. Before the guilty verdict was delivered, the prosecutor firmly argued to the jury that all evidence pointed to Karen having meticulously planned and carried out both murders without raising suspicion. She knowingly purchased ethylene glycol, disposed of its packaging, and disguised it as juice. After Elias and Rolando fell ill, she made no effort to help them. Instead, she attempted to destroy evidence and portrayed herself as a victim. The prosecutor submitted a list of ethylene glycol purchases made using Karen's account in connection with Rolando's murder. The prosecutors and the plaintiff urged the jury to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict, emphasizing that it was the only path to justice. They argued for Karen to be convicted of murder with aggravating circumstances. However, the defense argued that the prosecutor's office lacked solid evidence linking Karen to the deaths of Elias and Rolando. The defense attorney contended that while a person can appear virtuous and still commit a crime, it is equally possible for someone to have flaws and yet be innocent of any wrongdoing. The defense acknowledged that they could not present evidence that fully absolved Karen. Consequently, on December 1, 2022, the 12 members of the jury found Karen Leyland Oviedo guilty of murder in the death of Elias. She was also convicted of Rolando's death under aggravating circumstances, having used a treacherous method. Karen, dressed in black and wearing a white rosary around her neck, showed no emotion as the verdict was read. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. Following the verdict, the defense attorney questioned the jury's ability to make an impartial decision, arguing that they lacked legal expertise and a thorough understanding of the evidence. He also criticized the judicial process in Argentina, claiming it differs significantly from that in the United States and other developed countries with stronger legal safeguards. Despite these objections, Karen is now acknowledged as one of Argentina's most notorious criminals for poisoning Elias and Rolando. Although Karen was convicted, it does little to ease the sorrow of Rolando's and Elias's relatives. It remains unclear why Karen, a mother of two, took the lives of her loving and faithful husband and their son, who had his entire future ahead of him. Karen, the calculated poisoner, tried to evade justice. Had she succeeded in convincing authorities to cremate the bodies, she might have received a lighter sentence or even eventual release. The exact motive behind her actions has never been revealed. The families of Rolando and Elias still seek answers, but they may never find them, as Karen has never admitted guilt. Despite seemingly having a perfect life, a house, a car, financial stability, and an income higher than her husband's, she committed this shocking crime. She never took out life insurance on her husband, which makes her actions all the more perplexing. Now, she faces a life sentence behind bars. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Anne Margaret Karabin. Anne Margaret was born on April 5, 1959, in Poland, specifically in the city of Białystok, where she spent her childhood. Later, she moved to Canada to start a new life. She decided to settle in Mississauga, a large city in the province of Ontario, and met a man, Mr. Karabin. They got married, and in 1987, their first daughter, Caroline, was born, followed by Catherine a year later, and became a housewife, taking care of the home and children while her husband worked to provide for the family. Despite the appearance of having a happy family, Anne's husband showed little interest in parenting. He quickly grew bored with family life. As the girls grew up, more contradictions emerged in their views, and eventually, they decided to divorce. It was a difficult period, as her husband abandoned the children and resisted paying alimony, leading Anne to apply to the court. The case dragged on, causing significant financial and emotional stress. To stay afloat, Anne needed to work, and at one point, she even worked 2 jobs simultaneously, from morning to evening without days off. It was extremely hard. Despite her hard work, there was barely enough money for the 3 of them. She had no energy left to fully perform her maternal duties. During this time, Anne was constantly at work. Her children missed her dearly, hoped that she would overcome the difficulties and everything would be all right. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened. The divorce process dragged on for an extended period and fell into depression. This emotional turmoil began to take a toll, especially as she was in a foreign country and could not see her loved ones to share her feelings. She longed to find a new partner for support, yet she didn't even have time for her children, let alone a personal life. Even friends were hard to come by, as maintaining friendships required time she simply did not have. Instead, and found solace in alcohol, she began to drink a little to fall asleep faster and relax. A significant turning point for her came when she met a man named Doug at one of her jobs. They started dating, and gradually, she introduced him to her daughters. Doug seemed like a suitable partner for the future, so they decided to get married. At first, everything went well, and believed she had finally found happiness, thinking their life would return to normal. In the first year of marriage, and gave birth to a son, Robert. However, from then on, the relationship became increasingly tense. Doug exhibited bad character traits, such as aggression, intemperance. He constantly drank, lost his temper, and behaved unpredictably. His actions escalated to the point where Caroline and Catherine had to intervene to protect their mother from beatings. The worst part was that Doug targeted not only but also the girls, and continued to seek solace in alcohol, consuming more over time. Soon, she became dependent on it. When intoxicated, she was not aggressive but would simply fall asleep. Doug took advantage of the situation, and according to her daughters, he repeatedly abused them. This continued for quite a while before and discovered what was happening. When she finally confronted Doug about it, he attacked her and threatened her. Initially, she was at a loss about what to do. Despite her children's complaints, she was terrified of leaving her husband, plunging back into poverty, loneliness, and depression. Caroline took matters into her own hands, trying desperately to achieve justice and stop the violence. Unfortunately, no one listened to her or took any action. The Supreme Court could not overlook Doug's behavior forever, especially as he became increasingly cruel. Finally, in 2001, Doug was jailed for domestic violence, with additional charges added for drunk driving. However, his abuse accusations went unaddressed, leaving the girls feeling that justice had not been served. Any further complaints were simply ignored by the authorities. Caroline and Catherine felt relief that Doug, the dangerous man, was isolated and no longer posed a threat to them. Nevertheless, it was also the beginning of a new life for Anne, who was left alone with her 3 children. At this time, her daughters held high hopes that their mother could pull herself together, quit drinking, and improve their lives. However, the family dynamic suffered as they were all traumatized, and began to drink even more than before, significantly worsening the situation. She could no longer control her addiction, spending all the money she earned from several jobs on alcohol. Caroline and Catherine understood that their mother needed help but felt powerless to assist her. By that time, they had become teenagers, could partially care for themselves and their younger brother. This allowed them a bit of independence, but they still felt a significant lack of their mother's attention. As they grew up, conflicts increased, and disagreements became common. The atmosphere in the house turned tense, with constant arguments. The situation deteriorated further when both schoolgirls experimented with alcohol and marijuana. They spoke very badly of their mother, and as they entered a difficult adolescence, the sisters began to skip school. The situation at home is escalating. Those around them noticed the decline in their standard of living. Caroline and Catherine looked at their peers, realized that their friends had nice houses, beautiful clothes, delicious food, and loving parents, all of which they lacked. Even an evening dinner with their mother did not resemble family get-togethers. Family members had become very distant from each other. Some acquaintances supported the sisters, fed them, and gave them various things, but all of this was not enough for the teenage girls to feel normal. At the same time, they were very smart, energetic, and active. Teachers described their intelligence as above average. They succeeded in education and were expected to find decent jobs in the future. However, at that moment, they dreamed of becoming popular, wearing fashionable clothes like other girls who had no issues with their parents. Yet, there was something alarming in the behavior of these children. Some teachers noticed that Caroline and Catherine had a real talent for manipulating people. They easily achieved what they needed from others, and if they did something wrong, they often got away with it. Later, they dropped out of school altogether. As they grew, their dissatisfaction with their mother only grew, and soon real hatred for her awakened. They openly declared that she was a worthless mother who only thought of herself and her alcohol. Caroline and Catherine's turned to relatives, their father, and others for help, but no one did anything to assist them. Their negativity toward their mother only intensified. By 2002, they could no longer watch how she was ruining herself and them. In their minds, they began to mature a frightening plan. At that time, Caroline was 15 years old and Catherine was 14, but this did not stop them from developing a plan for a bloody massacre. They wanted to help their mother, but in a very distorted way. Their main goal was to save her from suffering. They wanted to do this in such a way as to gain popularity while also remaining winners. Caroline and Catherine knew that a life insurance policy for $200,000 had been issued for their mother. The mother had taken it out as soon as she had the opportunity at work, in case something happened to her. In this way, she insured and provided for her children. But Caroline and Catherine did not want to wait. They decided it was time to start an independent life. The sisters understood that they would not receive money if it were proven that their mother died at their hands, so the plan had to be carefully worked out. Thus, a school project called How to Kill a Mother was created. Initially, even they themselves perceived it as a joke. They shared it with their classmates and hoped to attract enthusiasts who would help find the best way to carry out the crime. They showed interest and constantly discussed various details of the murder so that they could execute it without getting caught. They began communicating with other teenagers and openly discussing everything in a specially created group. Their friends chose options, considering a gun or a knife. However, both sisters did not want blood and suffering for their victim, so they concluded that the most painless, simple way to kill their mother was by drowning. For some reason, they believed this was the easiest method with which they could quickly and easily cope, especially leave no traces. Naturally, all of this was actively discussed on social media, and many young people were involved in developing a plan for a murder without even realizing they were discussing a real crime. Nevertheless, everything quickly turned into serious crime planning. Caroline and Catherine began discussing it with classmates in the hope of understanding what difficulties awaited them and how to divert police suspicions from themselves, avoid punishment. They talked about other issues, particularly how to guarantee money from the insurance policy. The sisters planned to collect $200,000 from their mother's life insurance and actively discussed with classmates what they wanted to buy with this money. Caroline and Catherine envisioned buying a new cozy house and cultivating a plantation of marijuana there. With the first harvest and sale of substances, they planned to travel with friends to Europe, particularly Amsterdam. Ultimately, the sisters paid a lot of attention to their plot, which seemed meticulously thought out to the smallest detail. Finally, on the evening of January 11, 2003, Caroline and Catherine decided to kill their mother. However, disagreements arose with their group of like-minded peers, as a party among teenagers was planned for the same day, and everyone feared that the murder could cancel the festivities. It seemed implausible that the school children still did not take the sisters' idea seriously. One way or another, they were persuaded to postpone the bloody act for a week. It was rescheduled for January 18th. On that Saturday morning, the daughters approached their mother, unusually offering her a bottle of vodka. This made her very happy and blissfully. They began pouring shot after shot while simultaneously adding medicine to each glass, substances that serve as painkillers which, when combined with alcohol, could have very dangerous effects, including potential lethality. However, the sisters' goal was not to poison her. They did not even particularly hide the fact that they were giving her pills. Their mother saw this but willingly took them along with the strong alcohol, believing it would help her. All of this happened literally live on air. Caroline and Catherine constantly wrote to their friends in a messaging app, providing updates on the different stages of the process. When the bottle of vodka ran out, their mother was very drunk and sleepy. One of their friends even wished them luck and gave them a last piece of advice: to wear disposable gloves. Caroline and Catherine took his advice and used protective equipment, which logically made one of their classmates an accomplice in the crime they were about to commit, as he seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. As their mother's condition worsened, due to the pills combined with alcohol, the effects intensified. Finally, they suggested she take a relaxing bath and also get a massage. She agreed. They helped their mother to get up. She could barely stand on her feet, so it took them about half an hour to get to the bathroom. They then helped her undress. Caroline and Catherine suggested that their mother needed a back massage, asked her to lie on her stomach. Obviously, in her state, and could not think rationally, so she complied with this absurd demand. At this point, the eldest daughter began to drown her. She tried to resist but lacked the strength to fight back. She pushed her hands against the bottom of the bathtub with all her might, and could not rise to breathe. The sisters believed that in order for she to drown, it was necessary to keep her submerged for 4 minutes. Catherine stood nearby, periodically counting down to support her sister. Naturally, when Caroline finally let go of their mother, and showed no signs of life, Caroline and Catherine was elated that their plan had worked. They even screamed with joy. Afterward, they informed their group that the project had succeeded. Now they had to cover their tracks and divert suspicion from themselves. This had also been carefully planned. They arranged to meet friends at a restaurant, leaving their mother's body in the bathroom, and went to Odnoklassniki. Their first toast was specifically for the successful murder of their mother. Caroline and Catherine spent several hours there before returning home. A few minutes after they arrived, an emergency call came in from distraught people claiming they had found their mother's body in the bathtub. The ambulance attempted to resuscitate her, but of course, it was too late, as she had already been in the water for several hours. Caroline and Catherine crying constantly and appearing inconsolable. Interestingly, to play out this tragic comedy, one of them had even trained with someone from Odnoklassniki who was involved in a theater club. The scene was prepared and executed very carefully. From the outside, it seemed that the drunk mother had simply fallen asleep in the bathtub and drowned, making it look like an accident. However, the experience of the police suggested otherwise. Detectives rarely deal with drownings, most often it's small children who die when left unattended, so it appeared strange for an adult woman, especially one in a state of strong intoxication, to get into the bathtub unaided. How could she even manage to undress, climb in without falling and hurting herself? Everything seemed illogical. Nevertheless, the sisters had planned everything well, even leaving a glass from which their mother had drunk in the bathroom to reinforce the police's suspicion of an accident. They managed to eliminate any traces of a struggle. Of course, no one had entered the house, which meant there were no strangers present. Naturally, given their age and the fact that they were upset teenage girls, no one expected that they were capable of drowning their own mother. In any case, the police needed to talk to Caroline and Catherine to clarify the details. Both sisters told an emotional story about how they discovered their mother without signs of life after returning from a restaurant. They admitted that when they left home, she had been drinking, but there was nothing unusual about it since she had been an alcoholic for several years. And had never been aggressive. Rather, she tried to drown her sorrows from hard work days and failures in her personal life. According to them, they returned around 2 a.m. and immediately discovered their mother's body. They called emergency services to report the situation. Now, it was necessary to determine where Caroline and Catherine would live until they reached adulthood. Their younger brother, Robert, who was only 3 years old, was with his father at the time. Thanks to his sisters, the boy was doomed to grow up without a mother. Meanwhile, forensic scientists were working at the scene of the alleged accident. They relied on the temperature of the water, which had long since cooled to the level of the ambient air in the room, indicating that and had been dead for several hours before she was discovered. No signs of violence could be found on her body. However, Caroline and Catherine did not manage to commit the perfect crime so as to go unnoticed. The forensic expert noted that traces of desperate attempts remained on the victim's body, as if she had risen from under the water to take a breath while struggling against someone who was holding her. Barely noticeable marks were found on the tips of her fingers. In addition, Anne tried so hard to save herself that she tore off several nails. Despite this, after a toxicological examination, all the doubts of the police were dispelled. A lethal dose of alcohol was found in her body. Therefore, her death was immediately recognized as an accident resulting from drowning while under the influence of alcohol. The investigation was closed. Their aunt took Caroline and Catherine, becoming their guardian. As the girls planned, they received money from their mother's life insurance, part of which went to summer camp. It seemed that this initially humorous school project had evolved into the perfect crime, one that would evade justice. Caroline and Catherine simply could not remain silent about their success. They clearly did not feel the slightest remorse. They bragged that they were able to not only kill their mother but also get money while avoiding justice. Now they wanted to fulfill their dream of buying a beautiful house and planting it with weeds. However, they did not have time to implement their large-scale plan. 11 months after their mother's death, one of Caroline's friends went to the police to report the killers. From the very beginning, she was aware of what was happening. She so tormented by the pangs of conscience that she could not sleep normally. The friend revealed the truth about the planning and preparation of the crime that took place online, providing detectives access to her computer, where all these dialogues were recorded. Not only did the police see how this cruel plan was drawn up, but there were also numerous confessions from each of the sisters. However, the investigators believed that something more substantial was needed, so they decided to use this friend to obtain new evidence. Listening and recording devices were installed in the car. Now all that was left was to catch the criminals in a confession. In fact, it was quite simple to do this because Caroline and Catherine literally could not talk about anything else except the murder. Even after almost a year, it was enough to bring up this topic for them to start describing the process and their skills as killers. They continued to willingly talk about this event with obvious pride and without remorse. However, until that moment, few took the statements of theirs seriously. Now their talkativeness allowed the police to probe the details of the insidious plan. In particular, the sisters mentioned the pills that were never found during the initial toxicology examination. The test simply had not been carried out in full. After a lethal dose of alcohol was detected in the blood, everything else was discarded as unimportant. Finally, all the secrets became clear. On January 21, 2004, at 7 a.m., the police arrived at the house where Caroline and Catherine lived. Both girls were arrested and taken to the police station in their pajamas. They were still asleep. The computers of the main suspects were also confiscated. During interrogations, both denied their guilt. They tried their best to demonstrate innocent behavior. They even refused to wear the clothes that the police offered them. Both remained in their pajamas. This was probably intended to enhance their innocence. Of course, no one believed them. Under the pressure of evidence, the older girl, Caroline, quickly cracked. She burst into tears and admitted that she had killed her mother. Curiously, the younger sister Catherine could not be broken. She withstood hours of police interrogation, but still insisted on her innocence. Nevertheless, by this time, detectives had restored the browser history and harvested data from the computers, which allowed them to discover new shocking details of the cold-blooded crime. Investigators reviewed all the correspondence that the witness had provided. It was evident that Caroline and Catherine were unhappy due to their mother's alcohol addiction. From these electronic sources, sufficient data was available to accuse the sisters of premeditated murder in the Supreme Court of Canada. Given their age, juvenile justice was involved in the case. Curiously, both were released on bail and placed under house arrest pending trial. In late 2005, they went to trial and were convicted of first-degree murder. Eventually, in June 2006, the hearings began, and it was notable that they wore the same pajamas in which they had been arrested. Many believe this was a deliberate manipulation of the jury to elicit sympathy for the sisters. However, this did not significantly impact the prosecution, which presented two motives for the murder: the pursuit of insurance money and the desire to escape the vicious cycle of their mother's alcohol addiction. Judging by the correspondence, the sisters even saw this as a means of providing relief for their suffering mother. During the hearings, dozens of other schoolmates appeared, all of whom had participated in the same project, played roles in the planning, and offered advice, which meant they could well have been considered accomplices. Ultimately, none of them were prosecuted, as it was determined that they did not fully grasp the seriousness of Caroline and Catherine's intentions, believed it was merely a game. With the solid foundation of evidence the prosecution had, Caroline and Catherine had no chance of escaping punishment. They were found guilty of first-degree murder. However, for minors under this charge, the maximum sentence was only 10 years in prison, of which they would serve only 6 years behind bars. The remaining 4 years would be under house arrest due to good behavior. The younger sister, Catherine, was released in 2009. By this time, Catherine was 21 years old. Shortly thereafter, Caroline was also released at 23. Under the Canadian Privacy and Protection Act, their names were not initially disclosed in the media. However, it was impossible to keep this information hidden for long, as they spoke too openly about their horrific crime. The defense did not succeed, and their identities were revealed. Nonetheless, this did not prevent them from starting a new life. Both sisters entered college and earned their degrees. Catherine graduated from law school, got married, while Caroline pursued a career in technology to become a scientist. Later, she became a single mother and fully understood the difficulties her own mother had struggled with in the past. 17 years after the cold-blooded murders, in 2020, Caroline spoke to the media. By this time, she was 33 years old. She stated that she had radically re-evaluated her actions and now regretted them every day. She viewed her mother as a strong woman who tried to keep her family afloat but became depressed due to ongoing financial problems and difficult relationships with men. Caroline herself was traumatized and, like her children, could not fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening at that time. She simply decided to rid herself of what she deemed unwanted burdens. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Gemma Mitchell. In June 2021, a devout Christian, Mi Kun Chong, also known as Deborah, disappeared without a trace. Her friends had no idea what to do in this situation, as it was extremely out of character for her, especially since Deborah was vulnerable, a weak woman who could not stand up for herself. Just when the investigation began to gain momentum, a heartbreaking discovery was made. A long series of CCTV footage led the authorities to a cold-blooded killer. This crime story happened quite recently in the UK and tells the story of one of the first women whose sentencing was broadcast live on television. All happened in northwest London, where 67-year-old Deborah lived in her home. She was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but later moved to the Wembley area of the UK in 2004. She lived alone and shared her two-story house with a tenant. Deborah was a parishioner of the Emmanuel Church Center, located about 6 miles from her home. Being a pious woman, she regularly attended church services. Neighbors described Deborah as a cheerful, active, but slightly eccentric older woman who regularly visited her neighbors' houses for tea and company. As Deborah was a believer and a frequent churchgoer, she met many people over the years, which helped her fit in and become part of her local Wembley community. However, not all was well in her life. Unfortunately, Deborah suffered from several mental health issues, was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and acute stress. Fortunately, Deborah had a few people she could rely on, and one of the women she became close to was a 38-year-old named Gemma Mitchell. Gemma previously lived in Australia for 7 years. She was an osteopath who decided to return to the UK in 2015. Her mother and sister lived in Brent, North Wembley, and Gemma stayed with them. Her family was relatively well off. She received a good education and then went to King's College London, where she earned a degree in humanities that included a course in experimental anatomy. During her studies, Gemma proved to be an outstanding medical student and received awards for her knowledge of the human body. Her mother worked for the British Foreign Office, and the family's property in London was valued at approximately $5 million. Unfortunately, The family had recently fallen on hard times, the house was abandoned and in urgent need of repair. Gemma presented herself as a pious person, which was similar to Deborah. They met at the church in August 2020. Unfortunately, Gemma was unable to work as an osteopath in the UK due to the discrepancy between Australian and British practices and found herself essentially without a job. However, to bring Deborah closer, Gemma offered her services as a spiritual healer to help Deborah cope with her mental disorders. It is clear that this could not in any way address Deborah's current problems, as her schizophrenia persisted. By the spring of 2021, she was prescribed stronger medications. The people around her began to notice that Deborah had become more vulnerable and prone to strange behavior. In recent months, she had developed an obsession with Prince Charles and Boris Johnson. It's quite a sad story. Deborah believed that she had a parasocial relationship with Prince Charles and she could talk to him through a video on YouTube. She often set the table for the Prince and Boris Johnson as if they were going to show up at her house at any moment. After sending them several strange letters, she received a referral for psychiatric treatment. After Deborah was admitted to a medical facility for 2 weeks, she was prescribed a new course of medications. Although she did not want to take them, her friends persuaded her to go back. After that, for the most part, Deborah's life returned to normal. Her friends rejoiced with her and looked forward to the summer. However, on June 11, 2021, she suddenly disappeared. On that day, Deborah's lodger began to worry when he could not find her or contact her. Given the current state of her mental health, he knew it would be wise to immediately report this to the authorities. The tenant had seen Deborah the day before, so she could not have been gone for very long. CCTV footage recently confirmed this. The footage showed Deborah walking along Chaplin Road accompanied by her lodger. It is worth noting that Deborah did not walk very well, so if she was on the run, it would have been difficult for her to manage without transportation. As the days passed, it became increasingly obvious that something unusual had happened to Deborah. She had never disappeared like that before. Given her mental health and physical problems, this painted a worrying picture for the authorities. But despite Deborah's silence, some news about her emerged. Gemma informed Deborah's tenant that Deborah had decided to return home to Malaysia to spend time with her family. According to Gemma, Deborah had decided to return home for a year to clear her head. This raised doubts among police officers. To fly to Malaysia, Deborah would have had to present her passport at customs, but there were no stamps recorded on it. No one had seen her leave the house, no local taxi companies had given her a lift, and there was no banking activity indicating that she had used any public transport. Days turned, and there were still no confirmed sightings of Deborah. However, 16 days after she went missing, a discovery was made 200 miles from Wembley. There was a small coastal town called Salcombe. It has beautiful beaches and lovely nature. Many people visit this area as tourists. One woman who came to discover the beauty of new places found much more than she expected. On June 27, 2021, the woman was walking with her family along Bennett Road in Salcombe when she saw a nightmarish scene as she descended the old steps. Nearby lay a decomposing body, and the head was missing. The authorities were immediately called, and upon their arrival, forensic experts found that the body had been dumped along with a church business card and excerpts from the Bible. They soon became known that the body belonged to Mikun Chom. Due to the state of decomposition, an autopsy was unable to determine her exact cause of death. However, it could be said with certainty that she was missing her head. Injuries consistent with an assault were found on her body. Pathologists also believed that Deborah had been dead for about 2 weeks, which was consistent with the time of her disappearance. With the case now classified as a murder, investigators stepped up their efforts to find Deborah's killer, and surprisingly, it didn't take them long to find a potential suspect. CCTV footage from around Deborah's home revealed some very disturbing movements. As officers checked all the friends who knew Deborah, they began to focus on her life. Deborah would periodically hold seances in her garden, and Gemma was often with her. Friends reported that Deborah repeatedly mentioned that Gemma and Jesus healed her. These two women had previously been friends, but at least a week before Deborah disappeared, they may have quarreled over money. This theory was taken into consideration by the officers. Working in the field of osteopathy in Australia, Gemma stated on her professional website that she focused on the genetics of anatomy and the dissection of human cadavers. However, after she returned to England in 2015, she was no longer able to continue her professional life as a result of her circumstances. Gemma worked nowhere else, although she lived with her mother in their old family home in Brent. According to eyewitnesses, the rooms were filled with broken furniture and rubbish. Some rooms were impossible to enter. There were boxes and suitcases, freezers full of food, old mattresses, and building materials everywhere. The kitchen was described as very dirty, with various remains of rotting food on the stove and torn food packaging. The second floor of the house was under renovation, the walls and ceilings were unfinished, there was no roof. The bathroom was stained and in very poor condition. Overall, the whole house looked terrible. Maybe, this house was the cause of the conflict between Deborah and Gemma. According to the collected messages, to renovate Gemma's family home, Deborah was asked to give her £200,000, and Deborah promised her this. However, after a while, Deborah advised Gemma to sell the house and enjoy the money because life is too short. In a subsequent message, Deborah told Gemma that further repairs and construction would cost a lot of money, which Deborah had nothing for. And from that moment on, the relationship between them deteriorated. Over the next few days, Gemma became more and more persistent and aggressive towards Deborah. On June 8, 2021, Deborah finally got tired of listening to Gemma's complaints and sent her an SMS in which she wrote, "Until you resolve the issue with the house, I do not want you to come to me. I am experiencing stress from your presence." Just 3 days after this, Deborah disappeared. Fortunately, many surveillance cameras filled in all the gaps and allowed law enforcement to create a clear picture of what happened. At 6:15 a.m. on June 11th, Gemma was seen leaving her abandoned house with a large travel suitcase and a backpack on her shoulders. At that time, she was wearing a hat. By 6:40 a.m., Gemma had already changed her clothes, covered her face with a mask, and put her backpack inside the suitcase. In this CCTV footage, Gemma can be seen moving towards Deborah's house. At 7:56 a.m., she took off her hat. However, she could still be seen with the suitcase and mask on her face. Presumably, Deborah was tragically killed in the next 4 hours, because at 12:05 p.m., Gemma was again caught on CCTV, this time carrying 2 suitcases. They both seemed quite heavy as she struggled to carry them. The smaller suitcase most likely contained personal belongings and Deborah's financial documents, which Gemma needed for her further actions, as she intended to use them to create a will. Then, she called a taxi to take her with the 2 suitcases to the right address, but Gemma had to wait for the car for 40 minutes. It was only at 4:15 p.m. that she returned home with a large blue suitcase. Later that evening, Gemma went to a hospital located in the center of town for treatment of a broken finger. She told the doctors that she accidentally pinched her finger in a door. In the following days, in an attempt to cover up the crime, Gemma sent several fraudulent emails to a missing persons charity, and she sent a message to Deborah's tenant to say that the lady of the house had gone to Malaysia to visit relatives. Now, let's fast forward a few days and see that Gemma is on the move again. On June 26 at 8:05 a.m., a CCTV camera across the road from her house recorded Gemma booting up as she had rented a car from a car rental company the night before. On the way to Salcombe, she stopped at a gas station, where a surveillance camera captured her entering the store. After this, Gemma drove another 200 miles southwest to a coastal town. She parked her car near Bennett Road at about 9:12 p.m., where she found a secluded spot to dump the body. She was seen leaving the area 41 minutes later by the same camera. Now, despite being caught on several surveillance cameras, Gemma thought her plan had worked out well. However, there was one part of her carefully thought out scheme that even she couldn't predict. On the way back to London, her rental car had a ruptured inner tube, so Gemma had to stop at a service station and call a repairman to change the tire. This man still remembers his strange encounter with her. She seemed confused and bewildered, insisted that he not climb into the trunk of her car, not to mention putting a tire in there. Additionally, she wanted to keep the old flat tire. The repairman also noted that the car had a strange, heavy, and musty smell, as if someone had been sleeping in it without any ventilation. Unfortunately, he didn't know this at the time, but the car smelled of death when he had her tire fixed. Gemma returned home, where she returned the Volvo and threw the blue suitcase on the roof of a barn belonging to one of the neighbors. The very next day, Deborah's decapitated body was found. The authorities would need another 5 days to find her head. All these clues naturally pointed to Gemma, and the authorities decided to pay a small visit to her 15 minutes before midnight, taking her into custody. Gemma was immediately handcuffed, and the police began to search the house, looking for evidence that could link Gemma to Deborah's murder. As a result, Deborah's personal belongings and financial documents were found, as well as a fake will from Deborah that had been created on a computer. In this will, Gemma named herself and her mother as the beneficiaries of Deborah's entire estate, which was valued at the time at approximately £700,000. Gemma's first official interrogation was held 2 days later and was filled with a whole host of evidence, questions that Gemma did not answer. There are a great many surveillance cameras in modern London, and the fact that Gemma thought her journey with a heavy suitcase containing Deborah's body would go unnoticed did not work. Apparently, Gemma became more open during the interrogation and realized that she had no hope of justifying herself. Thus, during the first and subsequent interrogations, she remained silent, refusing to provide her version of events. Despite her refusal to cooperate with the investigation, the trial of Gemma Mitchell began a year later. On October 11, 2022, Gemma Mitchell not only denied killing Deborah but also refused to testify in her own defense. Her defense team claimed that there was no evidence to support the assertion that Deborah's body had been kept in the suitcase and that no evidence of a struggle was found in Deborah's house. Additionally, no weapon was discovered that could have separated the head from the body. But still, the motive for this crime was alleged to be money. The prosecution claimed that Gemma killed Deborah in order to forge a will and obtain money for home repairs. A notable level of heartlessness was revealed when it was noted that in the period between the murder and her trip with Deborah's body in the suitcase to Salcombe, Gemma went on a date with someone she had met on the internet at the London Zoo. It is worth noting once again that Gemma graduated with a first-class honors degree in the humanities, including a course in experimental anatomy, meaning she had the skills to remove a head from a body, although it is unclear why she did this. The deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict on October 27, 2022. Gemma Mitchell was formally found guilty of the murder of 67-year-old Mi Kun Chom. Gemma's conviction made national headlines. During the sentencing phase of the trial, which was broadcast live on television, Gemma became the first convicted murderer in England and Wales to be sentenced live, as well as being the first woman in the UK to have her sentence filmed. The judge's words to Gemma were quoted as follows. He stated that she had left her residence early in the morning with a large suitcase that, as shown on surveillance camera, was either empty or contained very little. He mentioned that she took public transport to Deborah's residence and stayed there for more than 4 hours. The judge noted that the suitcase she brought home was now clearly full and heavy. He expressed no doubt that she had killed Deborah in her home and concluded that, considering she had not provided any explanation during her interrogations, she had gone to Mi Kun Chom's house that morning with the intent to kill. He remarked that she showed absolutely no remorse and seemed to completely deny what she had done. With the irrefutable evidence against her, the judge announced that Gemma Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years, which meant that Gemma would not be eligible for parole until July 10, 2055. During Gemma's trial, a statement from Deborah's sister, who lived in Malaysia, was read to the court. In this statement, the sister wrote, "They still don't understand how she died. This secret will haunt she forever." Gemma never accepted responsibility for Deborah's murder, leaving many questions unanswered. However, for many, the motive appears clear and simple. Deborah was a vulnerable woman seeking help for her mental health problems. She confided in her friend Gemma, even offering her a significant amount of her savings to help with the house. But Gemma's actions constituted a vile and disgusting crime. Since Gemma's conviction, several of her former friends have come forward to share their own experiences with her, revealing that she had always tried to steal money, lured partners, and was a real snake. In the end, the case of Gemma Mitchell stands as a chilling reminder of how trust can be exploited in the most sinister ways. What began as a friendship rooted in shared faith and mutual support spiraled into a calculated act of betrayal, driven by greed and desperation. Deborah's tragic fate not only shattered the lives of those who knew her but also left an indelible mark on the UK's legal history, with Gemma's sentencing etched into public memory through its unprecedented live broadcast. As Gemma serves her life sentence, the unanswered questions surrounding Deborah's final moments linger, a haunting echo of a crime that stripped away a vulnerable woman's life and exposed the dark depths of human nature.